You're not going to have $1 million grand prize. You're not going to have $1 million grand prize. You're not going to have $1 million grand prize.
Follow along with the live draft board tonight. Watch our pick-by-pick analysis as we call the action from the 2024 FFPC Pros versus Joes Champagne League number 5 to find out who's winning a 2025 FFPC Main Event squad. We've got a great show for you tonight. Farrell Elliott and Dave Terpoli are here. I'm Eric Balkman. Stick around. We have 2 great hours, or close to 2 great hours, of fantasy football goodness on tonight's coverage of the Pros versus Joes. Greetings and salutations to all the Balkaholics and Ferrelliacs tuning in. This is the latest episode of the High Stakes Fantasy Football Hour, and it's presented by myffpc.com. I'm your slightly above average host, Eric Balkman. You know me from the Rotoviz High Stakes Lowdown, the High Stakes Fantasy Football Show on the Better Sports Network, and, of course, the Fantasy Football Players Championship. Well, welcome in my co-host tonight. You know him as the 11-time champion of FFPC leagues, and a guy you can watch on the Better Sports Network with myself and Theo Greminger from Player Profiler to Thursday night at 7 p.m. Eastern Time, drafting a best ball team in the FFPC Best Ball Tournament. We'll have all the action starting at 7 p.m. on Thursday. You follow him on the X at Dave Terp. It is Dave Terpoli. Dave, welcome in, man.
How we doing?
We're doing good. We're excited. We missed you last night. Brandon Murchison from Rotoballer filled in, but glad to have you back tonight. For sure, as we'll give Brandon the night off and bring you on. Farrell Elliott will be here shortly as well. He of the Kentucky Fantasy Football State Championship. Post in the chat room right now that we have going on YouTube, X, and Facebook. You can also connect with us on X directly at HSFF Hour, at Eric Balkman, at Dave Terp. Facebook.com/HSFF Hour is where to go. highstakesfantasyfootball@gmail.com is the email address that you want to send those questions, and we'll try to get to them throughout the program tonight as we cover tonight's 5th draft of Pros versus Joes. Reminder, only one person's going to win anything. First place gets a 2025 FFPC Main Event entry where they can compete for a $1 million grand prize. That's a $2,000 value. And we found out last night from Darren Armani that the Pros versus Joes overall winner is going to get an awesome Pros versus
That's huge
championship belt. It is
really cool.
Yes. First time ever we're doing that. And Darren brought that on the show tonight. So everybody's competing for that overall prize as well as the first place prize tonight. Let's get into it, ladies and gentlemen, with the first round about almost over here. I'll take you through it tonight. The FFPC Joes of Todd McIntyre and Curtis Van go with Christian McCaffrey first overall. Pat Kerrane from Legendary Upside goes with CeeDee Lamb. Dan Seidenfaden and Jeff Conklin go ahead and draft Bijan Robinson at the 103. Jim Coventry, hitting cleanup tonight, takes that third running back off the board at 104 in Breece Hall. A lot of receivers after that. Brian Jervelin ends up going with Tyreek Hill. Jamar Chase to John Daigle from Establish the Run. Then at the 7 pick, Ian Hubbard takes Amon-Ra St. Brown, A.J. Brown to Fantasy Alarms, Andrew Cooper at the 108, Justin Jefferson 109 to Frying Pan Inc. That is Brad Petri and Darren Larson, the former Kentucky Fantasy Football State Championship Main Event winners. Garrett Wilson goes to Schopp and Krautwurst. That's Mike Schopp. That's Adam Krautwurst, the host of the Deep End Fantasy Football Podcast. Puka Nacua goes to Nick Thompson at 111. And Jonathan Taylor to the Scores Justin Boone to make it 4 running backs in the first round. Speaking of the KFFSC, why not bring in the definitive commissioner right now? Farrell Elliott hopping aboard on the broadcast tonight. Farrell, how excited is it to be reunited with Dave Terpoli on this program this evening?
You missed me, don't lie.
Now, Dave, let's don't get started with
you were a little emotional. I'm sure
with
when you
any
signed off last night, you
unpleasant
cried a little bit.
Last night, people were disappointed, even though your stand-in was very entertaining. And, you know, I think some people just freaked when they saw Dallas Cowboy paraphernalia on our guest host. But nevertheless, Balky, thank you for welcoming in the KFFSC guys tonight. And, Petri and Larson are past champions, because once you're a champion, Balky, you're always a champion.
Yep.
We don't use that word. Former, just don't do it, because, they are celebrated as such. And you know what? Last year in the big paybacks, they muscled up and exerted their will over the crowd of KFFSC drafters. So it probably they will return to that similar main event glory this year. Would it be great, Balky, if we had Terp in the room?
I said once in the next 10 years I'll be there.
It'd be tremendous. Like I can't wait for that year, because that's hopefully it's this year. It's going to happen for sure. Terp, let's talk about the first round here tonight. 108 tonight, AJ Brown, and I'd say, that's a little bit of a stretch on him, but that's not the case anymore. It was a few weeks ago where AJ Brown was 112, 201, but now where Coop grabbed him right 108, 109. It's interesting to see him go up these draft boards. How high is too high for AJ Brown?
Not high enough. I mean, I'm trying not to be a homer here, but at the end of the day, you saw the stretch that he went on last year with Hurts.
Mm-hmm.
As Eagles were down the stretch, you saw what he could be with an offense that didn't move him around at all. Now you bring in Kellen Moore, talking about playing him in the slot more. I mean, the route tree with him and Devonta Smith is pretty much secure. Goddard's there, but I don't expect him to really eat into their pie. So, I mean, to me, AJ Brown's my number 2 receiver right behind CeeDee Lamb. I just think he's being undervalued, and really starting, fantasy managers are starting to realize that what he has wide receiver 1 upside. He has number 1 player upside.
You can never be embarrassed for drafting AJ Brown too highly. And those people that got him in the second round, that's an embarrassment of riches. As he was going.
Seriously, I've seen some teams looking back. I was bored at work today. I was looking through some of the early teams that got drafted. And some of these guys, if everything obviously has to work out injury-wise with preseason and early this season, but some of these guys have some powerhouses. AJ Brown, second round pick. I mean, he's never getting there again.
We'll get to this right now, because this other player is not going to be drafted for a while, and I don't feel bad about table talking a little bit here. But John H. in the YouTube chat wants to know, Terp, what do you think of a Kyler Murray and Trey McBride stack? Right now, Trey McBride, 205 on average. He ends up going to Petri and Larson here at the 204 tonight. Kyler Murray, I mean, you can make it happen pretty easily. He's not going in the FFPC best ball tournament drafts until the 707. What do you make of Murray and McBride for this format?
Funny you asked that, because me and Dan Williamson have a best ball team going right now that's being drafted. We took McBride in the second round, and we took Kyler Murray in the 8th round. So very high on that team, very high on both players. Murray's my second-ranked quarterback owned right now in all my drafts so far, and McBride is definitely a guy I want to get exposure to. So very high, no downside whatsoever there to me. We saw at the end of the season. Do I expect it to be like that, this year? Probably not, with Marvin Harrison and some of the other guys they brought in. Zay Jones, the rookie Benson, I think could be more in the passing game. So we'll see. But I mean, Kyler Murray is one of my. If you look at some of these streams in the past, I've never been a Kyler Murray guy. Never drafted him. Always. It's like the Zeke thing. Never. Derrick Henry, those guys I never drafted. All three.
Murray doesn't play for the Cowboys.
I know. All three of these guys I've drafted this year, and
it surprises me that you're not a Kyler Murray guy, because he's the ideal fantasy football quarterback. I don't know if I would want him if I was a general manager of one of the 32 teams. I don't know if I would want him as my quarterback. But if I'm managing one of 12 in fantasy football, I am in love with him as my quarterback. I'm surprised that you haven't had more of him in the future, and I think you're doing the right thing this year, rostering him off.
Where he's being drafted is a gift right now. I mean, you can get Kyler Murray in the 7th, 8th round. Like, I'm doing that almost every time. I mean, it's
crazy.
He should be going up there, with some of these other guys that are being drafted, the CJ Strouds of the world, guys like that. Murray should be up because, we all know he has the rushing ability, and that's what we look for when we're talking about a ceiling when it comes to the quarterback position. With Marvin Harrison, with Trey McBride, with the other, secondary weapons they have. I mean, he seems to be motivated this year. He seems to be, working. That was always the question with Kyler Murray is, was the work ethic there? Was the mental stuff there? It seems like all positive so far in camp. It seems like all things. I mean, Arizona could be a playoff team this year. So
he may have grown up a little bit. Balky, the last entry here in the comments, Michael Quincell, listening and drafting. Now, he's in the 14th round of his Pros versus Joes. I want to thank Mike because he's drafting and he's in the show. He's always in the show. And he's in the 14th round. This is where you're going to win it, Mike. 14 to 20 is where you're going to win.
He is drafting right now in a Fantasy Pros Championship, watching this Pros versus Joe's draft, and he'll put his full attention on this Pros versus Joe's draft.
That's impressive.
Get
in there, Mike.
Pros. Yeah, exactly.
Get in there and get that champion.
He's been pretty much like every single show we've done. The last 4 Pros versus Joe's, he was in there as well. Farrell, I want to ask you this here. When we look at, actually, you know what? I take that back. Let me put a pin in that question for you about tight ends. Let me bring in our first guest tonight. He's drafting from the 11 spot tonight. Already has Puka Nacua and Marvin Harrison on his roster. He'll be competing for $1 million grand prize in the FFPC main event this year. Please welcome onto the program, Mr. Nick Thompson. Nick, I think you're muted right now. No, you're not. You're a professional. You know how it's done. Nick, welcome aboard the show.
Thanks. Thank you for having me.
So Nacua and Harrison, young and hungry. I wonder if the Harrison pick, which, I mean, he's going pretty high anyway, but how much of that pick was like you're looking at this draft from the standpoint of, if I don't win the whole thing, I might as well finish last. Harrison is a great guy that if he ends up going for 14 touchdowns and 90 catches and 1,300 yards his rookie year, this could be an excellent pick to win for you here at the 202.
Yeah, I think so. It was between Marvin Harrison and Jahmyr Gibbs for me. Really like the idea of the wide receiver at the 11 or 12 spot this year. And I'm up next. I just got the notification.
You are. You're right.
I was in this event 2 or 3 years ago. I led the whole year until like the final 3 weeks and then fell off. But yeah, so if you ain't first, you're last.
that's in the Tao of Ricky Bobby. That is very important to understand in this contest. Nick Thompson, who is drafting from the 11 hole tonight, right between Mike Schopp and Adam Krautwurst from the deep end, and then Justin Boone from the score. This is it's kind of weird to say, but this is an FFPC draft. Things happen. One of only 2 teams to start off receiver. You are now on the clock, Nick. What are you thinking at 311?
Well, if I heard we have a Philly fan in here, I'm gonna make him happy here with Devonta Smith, continuing in the trend of elite receivers.
Love it.
Nick Thompson, who finished in the the FFPC Pros versus Joes competition in 2021, finished 8th overall. Very impressive in your one shot at this. Now you're going to get a chance to redeem yourself here, Nick. Not even redeem yourself, but even better, your 8th place overall showing. Receiver. Nacua, Harrison, Devonta Smith. Tell us who's next.
Again, this is a best ball event. Wide receivers tend to have the highest upside here. And I like my chances with Mr. Deebo Samuel.
Wow, look at that. That's a lot of targets on this team. Nacua, Harrison, Smith, and Samuel. Nick, when you came into this draft knowing that you had the 11 pick, how much did you entertain a 4 wide receiver start here from this spot?
Was generally the plan most of the way. Wasn't outside of Christian McCaffrey and Bijan, not too keen on Breece Hall. And then when Marvin Harrison came around, I knew he wouldn't last another round, and really wanted to have that opportunity at some high upside in that high octane offense this year.
Nick, when you consider roster construction, both of this format is a best ball slim, the FFPC main event, a managed league, but they're both 20 rounds. How much variation do you envision between your roster construction in that event, which honestly does have kickers and defenses, and then this event that doesn't have kickers and defenses?
Yeah, typically I tend to draft, as I was alluding to, more wide receivers in these best ball type events. I feel like their spike weeks are larger, and so I target them earlier. Although I am a fan of the hero RB kind of in the 7th, 8th round as well.
What do you, I mean, like, how do you think drafts are going to go for the main event this year? I mean, we've seen those 3 running backs pop off in the first 5 picks pretty much every single time in Pros versus Joes. I've seen a ton of them, Nick, in a lot of other fantasy pros drafts where after those running backs are off the board, people are kind of avoiding receivers to a certain extent too. Obviously, we see Jonathan Taylor sneaking into the first round here, but it's like if you don't have a top 4 or top 5 pick, I think your focus has to be on receiver here in the first round, right?
I think that's right. Outside of Christian McCaffrey, if I've got a top 5 pick, I think I'm going wide receiver anyway. So I actually like the 6, 7, 8 slot here because, as you mentioned, you see 3 running backs go off in the top. I'm plenty happy with a Tyreek Hill, Jamar Chase, or Amon-Ra St. Brown in the 5, 6, 7 slot.
You know, I'm just looking here, and I'm impressed with your resume, Nick. As I'm looking at all, I mean, you're looking at what 9 or 10 championships you've already won in the FFPC. What was the most difficult thing when you signed up for the FFPC, however many years ago it was, in adjusting to tight end premium and the fact that there's 2 flexes?
Yeah, so the tight end premium was a big jump. Actually, I think my very first draft in the FFPC didn't really realize it was tight end premium and wondered
Never
why
a good
Travis
thing.
Kelce went 2nd or 3rd overall. And then if you look at this draft, right, there's 6 tight ends in the 2nd round. I think a similar type thing happened, and I kind of wondered what was going on, and I quickly clicked into the rules and noticed that. So I stacked up on 3 kind of mediocre tight ends that year when I didn't get one of the top, 5 or 6, and learned my lesson with my 2nd draft that year. But I actually enjoy the tight end premium. I think, in your standard home leagues that are PPR, outside of the top this year, probably 3 to 5 tight ends. I don't know that there's a big difference maker. And so I think it really kind of makes the tight end position more valuable and makes the draft much deeper.
Nick, were you disappointed when I look at the first 4 rounds here? You load up on receivers. You're probably thinking, okay, well, maybe I'm going to get some running back falling to me here from either Schopp and Krautwurst or from Boone. But only 1 running back drafted between those 2 guys on either side of you. Man, this could be a war for the green, a different kind of green at the end of the back end of this draft here.
Yeah, I think so. But, I'll get to see what the gentleman at 10 slot does in front of me here on the turn. And perhaps the gentleman in the 12 slot here is anchoring on Jonathan Taylor. So we'll have to see. But, that just means that everybody's going wide receiver like I did. I'm happy that I grabbed the ones that I wanted early.
Yeah, that's right.
I showed it earlier, Nick, in the YouTube chat, but Teague Orgman, our 2023 reigning FFPC Main Event $1 million champion, taken in the draft tonight, and he thinks you got a very sharp start here tonight with that 11 spot. 4 receivers. We'll be following your team as we continue through the draft tonight to see how you fill in the spots at running back and tight end. I want to thank you for coming on, being a part of the show, making a couple of picks on air. Good luck in the main event this year, and enjoy drafting season, my friend.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Good luck, man.
Thank you. Thank you, Nick
See you,
Thompson, popping aboard to make a couple of picks. Farrell, you've been with me for all of them so far. Have you seen a receiver start yet? I don't recall seeing one in Pros versus Joes this year.
I haven't. No. And it's going to be, when I see that, I'm always intrigued. And I'm intrigued about 5, 6, 7, and 8. What is he going to do with that? Because Turp doesn't agree with me, I don't think, but I think the running backs run off and run out. And that's he's you need 2, maybe 3 to get you through.
When you have to click the button,
Pardon me?
I agree with you. When you have to click the button, I agree with you. In best ball, I don't agree with you.
Okay, well,
Clicking the button's a lot harder, when you have to click Ty Chandler or Marshawn Lloyd or somebody like that.
I get that clicking the button. I'm learning all kinds of cool insider.
When you got to click the button, it's
click
a lot
the
harder.
button, and we had a guy that was OTC the other night, and I thought, geez,
You're learning a lot in these streams.
You've got prescriptions for that, but that was not what he needed, and so I'm learning out this cool thing. A young girl told me the other day that I had Raz, so that was good. I could go, well, really? I don't know. That
Isn't it Riz? I thought it was Riz.
Maybe she missed. Maybe I didn't hear it correctly.
Yeah.
But it's whatever is short for charisma, and it changed my whole day. That's all I'm saying.
Farrell Elliott, the original Riz.
You got a little extra
tonight.
Extra juice in your step.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah, I got a little spring in my step tonight.
You definitely have Riz for sure. And that's a compliment. That is a 100% compliment.
So I'm learning. I'm going to use that OTC.
Terp, the last time we broadcasted Pros versus Joes last Tuesday with you, we saw that was the drunk on tight ends draft. Where all of them get pushed up. Tonight, we see 6 of them go off the board in the second round, including.
This is more like it. I mean,
it's called normal draft.
But this is the second straight night too. I mean, we saw Kyle Pitts last night, who has an ADP of 305 in the Fantasy Pro or in the FFPC Best Ball tournament. He goes at 208 last night to Bob Lung. Pat Kerrane, the $2 million man, takes him at 211 tonight. Kyle Pitts really inching up the draft boards too, Terp.
Yeah, a month ago, I said where Kyle Pitts was getting drafted in the beginning of the 4th round, end of the 3rd round, he was going to get moved up. I mean, it was only a matter of time. Obviously, with the tight end premium, you get positive press on this guy. The hype that surrounds him will get him up in that slot because there's a lot of players that, if you look in drafts and you've seen in the last couple of days, they're kind of stale right now. Chris Olave, Devontae Adams, Jalen Waddle. Guys like that, they're kind of in a stale. Nobody really wants to take them. They're kind of just there. And it's like you're seeing these shiny toys being Kyron Williams getting more positive press, moving up. Kyle Pitts, Evan Ingram continue to move up draft boards.
The first team to go tight end is from the 5 spot tonight. Evan Ingram at the 305, and then George Kittle at the 408. That was Brian Gerblin, the FFPC Joe, doing that. We do have 4 quarterbacks off the board here as well. And then, I guess I keep talking about Kyle Pitts, being drafted too high. But regardless of what I think, it just seems like, to your point, Terp, he is climbing up. And once again, if you want Pitts on your team, if you are a believer in Cousins and you are a believer in that Falcons offense and you are a believer in who's the cat from the Rams that is the OC there now, whose name is escaping me?
Zach Robinson.
Zach Robinson is running there. If you're a believer in him, then you are paying the iron price for Drake London, who went at the 207 to John Daigle tonight. You're paying the iron price for Kyle Pitts, who went at the 211 tonight. I'm kind of on the side of and I think we talked about this a little bit last night, kind of like getting Darnell Mooney late. We saw, who was it who took Rondale Moore on the clock late? Was that Pretty in Pink that ended up going with Rondale Moore? Yeah, I mean, and those guys are super cheap, and this is best ball, so it's not like if you want a piece of the Falcons offense, Farrell, you don't necessarily have to sink a 2nd-round pick into it. You can get a piece of it later.
No, but I love what's going to happen with Pitts when on August 9th in the first quarter that the first team for Atlanta runs out versus the Dolphins in preseason, and Pitts takes most of the snaps from the flex position. Then everybody's going.
He's going to be going at the 1-2 turn before Vegas.
Everybody's just going to lose their mind, and at some point, you need to probably pump the brakes on that, but it won't. And if you're willing to pay in the early mains, if you're willing to pay a number 3 for Pitts, and you want Pitts on your teams this year, that's where you should look at Pitts, because Terp is right. He's just going to keep shooting up the board.
Pitts and Dalton Kincaid are 2 guys that could continue to move up draft boards as we get closer to September.
Yeah.
They're not the only 2 can move up. I'm just saying, as of right now, I don't think any of the other. Laporta, I don't think will move up unless an injury happens. Kelsey, I don't think will move up. Trey McBride, I don't think will move up unless an injury happens, obviously. But Kincaid and Pitts, I feel like everything, all the press is going to be on them. All the positivity is going to be on them. Kincaid looking great so far. Those are 2 guys I think can get up even higher than they're going now. The rest of the 3, I don't think is going to move.
Bonky, Terp is going to convince us that you can cram 12 guys in the first 7 draft slots here.
Anything's possible. That 12 slot's wide open this year. I mean, we've talked about how you want to start it. That 12 slot's going to be, I think, by the time that we all see each other in Vegas, I think that 12 slot, before the games happen, is going to be a wild drafting position, because, I mean, you're going to see some wackiness. I don't think you're going to see as much standard picks like Jonathan Taylor and Sam Laporta that are going in this format. I think you're going to see guys get up there that you don't think should be up there.
I think that's what makes it so compelling. There's so many people we've talked to that say they don't like the 12 spot for 2024, and I think it's just because they're not comfortable with anybody there. And when you're not comfortable with,
it's a difficult spot. It's a very difficult spot to draft to, especially this year.
And that's why the variance gets increased there. That's
but
why
I can tell you one thing: I would love to have the 12 slot on Saturday in a main event draft. After those 2 games are over, you could be getting some. Like if things go great. If things go great, you could be looking at like an AJ Brown, Jamar Chase star with the wackiness that could happen if Kelsey gets moved up, Pacheco, Mahomes, Jackson, Flowers, Andrews, and then you have all the Packers guys with Josh Jacobs and Watson and Reed, and then you have AJ Brown, Devonta Smith, Saquon Barkley if he has a good game, Hurts. Right. All those guys can get moved up. If you're drafting Saturday, that could be.
It's much more intriguing when the players don't perform in week 1. Remember Chris Johnson years ago?
You remember Peyton Manning? I love that year. As long as you went the second pick. As long as you knew a live draft, somebody was taking Peyton Manning number 1. As long as you dodged that week 1. And even some teams that took Peyton Manning when he had that 7 touchdowns, they still lost. And that team was dead on arrival once you took Peyton Manning number 1 overall, even with the season that he had.
And Bonky, do you remember that year because Johnson played Pittsburgh? Do you remember how far he went down in the draft? It was 12 fantasy points or something.
Yeah, I don't remember offhand.
It was just
I would much rather a shootout in those games. Because like last year, everybody was kind of there was nothing that really stood out. Kelsey, obviously, banged up to start the season. Jahmyr Gibbs was very, very suspect.
And now we get 2 games. We get 2 games.
Mm-hmm.
St. Brown was the best, but I mean, he didn't really set the world on fire. He's still a first round pick, but
46 and a half for that Chiefs Ravens game. 48.5 is the total on that Packers Eagles game. That's week 1 too, when sometimes especially these offenses don't play a whole lot together in the preseason. We could see some sloppiness, but sloppiness on the defense.
And also the Eagles game, the thing that worries me, I'm sure, is we're not on East Coast time zone. We're talking about a game across the pond. So
it's so difficult. Eagles have
not difficult, but those games that they have every year, they're always funky. All those 9:00 starts on the East Coast, like the games that are in Europe, they're never shootouts. Remember Tyreek Hill and Kansas City? We thought that game was going to be up and back, up and back, up and back, and it was a colossal flop.
For what it's worth, I mean, at least it's an 8:15 start Friday night for the Eagles.
That changes a lot of things,
right?
It does.
Yeah. Let's do this, guys. He's on the clock right now. I'm going to let him make his pick, and then we're going to bring him on as our next guest here on the coverage of the FFPC Pros versus Joes. He's a guy that you have read his work on Fantasy Alarm. You've listened to him on SiriusXM Fantasy Sports Radio before as well. A guy who is a 3-time FSWA award finalist. He is a guy that is no stranger to the FFPC format. One of the tight end whisperers, maybe the tight end whisperer, if you ask.
The tight end whisperer.
It is Andrew Cooper at Coop A Fiasco on the X. Please welcome him in right now. He's drafting from the 8 spot, and it seems like a pretty solid team, Coop. Are you happy with it?
Yeah, I'm feeling good about it, dude. I'm feeling good about this show too. I've been watching along. A lot of Riz, a lot of Raz going on in here.
That's what we're here for.
It's a hot room. It's a hot board. I'll tell you, I did just you brought me in a little rattled because I did actually get sniped just now. So I've been feeling pretty good about my picks all along. Chris Godwin is a guy I really
that hurts.
Standalone article on him, and I needed a wide receiver there. Really excited about his upside getting back in the slot, right? People forget last year he was dealing with a neck injury. In the playoffs, he was dealing with a knee. Like outside of that, he had those games where he was getting 10, 11, 12 targets. So in a full PPR format, I really want him there. But settled on Hollywood Brown. We'll see. He's got the prove it deal, right? And anytime there's guys in those situations, they care about pad and stats. He cares about 2 things: staying healthy, pad and stats. Right. Maybe getting a ring, right? That's why you sign there. But I don't know. It's exciting to me, especially in best ball where I don't have to slot him in.
The thing I'll bring up, you and I were in a Fantasy Alarm mock draft earlier this week. Sean Green, who drafted in the Pros versus Joes last night, pointing out to you tonight, Coop, and you could probably speak to this better than I can. is he says you're taking the same players from the mock we did. Is that true? Have you been loading up on the same players here?
You know, it's funny that was a tight end premium mock, of course. Right. It's good to have you in there. But yeah, I mean, I usually don't load up on the same guys. I don't overdo it. I let the board come to me. And that's what's so much fun about these drafts and so crazy about them is that, like, I could sit here with Justin Boone's rankings in front of me, and he's not going to go off those, right? He's going to build a team. He's going to play the board. It doesn't even help you, right? Like, my rankings are out there. You can go get them, but I'm not always going to do the same thing. It just so happened that here I'm taking value. I'm just taking best available, you know? And, of course, when you get a lot of sharp gamers in here that know the format, it just so happened that when I was up, a lot of running backs were best available. So it looks like I'm going pretty heavy and fragile on the RB here.
You speaking of not fragile at RB, you had a rock solid pick at the 205, and how thrilled were you to see Jahmyr Gibbs fall all the way to you?
Full PPR, man. And then again, that's not even a pick I typically make, but this is the format for it. It's a beautiful thing. If, you know, God forbid anything happens with David Montgomery, there's big upside there. And of course, on the flip side for Montgomery, but just a very safe player. So yeah, that was easy click.
Coop, the other player that I think is kind of in the news right now that ended up being on your team, you got a little bit of a value on Joe Mixon. He's dealing with a soft tissue injury in Houston right now. It's funny because he's it's early in the preseason hasn't even started. Like, we're still in training camp, but he's not a young player anymore, and he's definitely not a young player for his position. How do you sort of balance out the fact that he's got this soft tissue thing here in late July to knowing that it's still late July and there's a long time before the start of the season goes? Obviously, you felt pretty good about it to take Mixon at the 508.
Yeah, I'll tell you how I balance that out is my most important leagues, like my big hometown league, we draft on September 1st. That's how we balance that out. And as you get closer, those soft tissue injuries, those things become more and more important to me. Right now, I'm kind of in the world that you guys talked about earlier, where it's like I'm looking around, especially doing the big tournaments and the main events, and I'm saying, where can I get an advantage? Right? Where can I get this guy? Like you talked about AJ Brown. Now I have to spend up on a guy I really like when I didn't have to a month or so ago, right? When he was going the second round. It's like I'm trying to see where I can get an advantage and say, okay, well, when things are looking good with Joe Mixon and people realize that Dameon Pierce is returning kicks and Cam Akers might not even be on the team, they just brought him in, you know, as like a camp body, then, you know, people are probably going to get a little more excited about Joe Mixon being the lead back for a team that has, you know, Pro Bowl Laramie Tunsil at left tackle, and they use fullback, you know, Andrew Beck to open things up, just like in San Francisco and Miami. And they have 3 stud wide receivers that are going to help them move the ball and a tight end. And he could just fall backwards into 15 touchdowns on a team like this. So that's why a guy like that, to me, I'll absolutely take him at that spot, even with 2 running backs already on the team.
The other thing I you know, just looking at things that are standing out to me about your team tonight, Coop, you're the only team who has drafted so far 3 running backs. You have 3 running backs on your roster. You drafted them all by the 5th round. At this point, I mean, at some point that dead zone is going to start, you know, rearing its zombie heads into this draft. And then at that point, that's when you can start scooping up the receivers. Was that sort of part of the attraction of drafting Gibbs, Jacobs, and Mixon as early as you did?
Well, the attraction to FFPC for me is the tight end premium. As you know, I'm kind of contractually obligated at this point to try and find late round and breakout tight ends for everybody. You know what I mean? It's like Howard Bender, it's got me chained to the desk trying to figure it out. So what I do is I take best available for the first few rounds, knowing that this particular format plays right into my skill set, right? For somebody like, for me, what I do, a lot of times taking Travis Kelce or Sam Laporta at ADP is kind of using up my juice. I'm not leaning into what I'm good at, right? So that's what I'm doing here. And same thing for people out there. Like, if you are the best if you are the guy every year that finds the Puka Nakuas and finds guys off waivers, wait on wide receiver, right? Lean into that. Same thing with running back. If you're really good at finding breakout running backs, go 0 RB, right? Lean into your skill set. For me, tight end is a position I have to be deep into. And a lot of the guys have gone that I like. Pat Farmy is the guy that I like. But, you know, we're going to do our best to find them and create value that way. I'm on the clock right now.
Yeah, you are. You are on the clock. And I think that's what it's all about. We as fantasy players need to know our weaknesses. We need to know our strengths. Your strength is finding tight ends. And don't worry, everybody who's watching, I will put Coop under the spotlight here and interrogate him. We'll try to get some sort of
pressure
tight end goodness out of him tonight.
Still
That's
no tight
idea.
ends for the tight end whisperer.
Which is what you want to do, right? You'll get the good guys late that he knows. So right now, Coop is on the clock, about 40 seconds to go here. So far, his squad is made up of 3 receivers and 3 running backs. The backs are Gibbs, Jacobs, and Mixon. The receivers, A.J. Brown, Ayuk, and Hollywood Brown. What can Brown do at wide receiver? We're going to find out as the season unfolds for Andrew Cooper from Fantasy Alarm. 20 seconds on the clock, Coop. Talk us through this pick here.
I think I'm going to pull the trigger on C.J. Stroud here. Not a pick I'm typically making because I love guys like Anthony Richardson and Kyler Murray. But again, these sharp leagues, if people want to go for the mobile upside with Kyler, Richardson, makes all sense in the world to me. But a guy like C.J. Stroud, I'm looking at the board now, and I'm looking at where Nico Collins and Stephon Diggs and Tank Dell all went in the first 3 rounds. I don't understand how that's even going to be possible if CJ Stroud doesn't offer a good level of floor. So I can always circle back and find more upside later, but I think now is the right time. And again, we'll wait on tight end.
What are your thoughts? Sort of just obviously you love the Houston offense because you're taking Stroud here. Which one of those 3 receivers, Collins, Diggs, Dell? Which one? I mean, do you want to be in business with all of them? Are you sprinkling? All 3 of them throughout your drafts this year? Are you staying away from any of them? How do you feel about those 3 guys this year?
I've got one that I'm staying away from. People don't like to hear it though. They don't like to hear you fading any of these guys, but especially their darlings from last year. But for me, I look at Tank Dell, right? And we got to remember this team, this scheme that Bobby Slowick brought over from San Francisco, it uses the fullback. It's like that's why when you look at San Francisco with Kyle Juszczyk playing half the game, they never really have a wide receiver 3. You look at Miami with Alec Ingold playing all those snaps. You just can't get everybody snapped. Now,
same thing in Baltimore.
Same thing in Baltimore, right? Patrick Ricard. That's why you're the king, man. That's why you're a sharp boy. That's why you got that Riz and that Raz, my dude.
Riz and Raz, man.
Like that Raz. Rename that Raz.
You got the Raz, man. So I'll tell you, when I look at especially goal line, and you bring Andrew Beck in and you bring the extra tight end in, you're not going to take out the 6'4" Nico Collins. You're not going to take Stephon Diggs out of the game because he'll cry his little eyes out. And you look at Tank Dill, who was 165 pounds, and everyone got upset. I mean, the entire internet was so upset when he got hurt, right, last year.
Yeah.
They're like, why is he in there blocking at goal line? And I'm thinking the same thing. Why have Tank Dill in there blocking at goal line? Why haven't been at all on those goal line plays? Put in the other guys. And that could make him a part-time player and cap his upside. Now, in a format like best ball, sure. Tank Dell, home run hitter, no problem. But in a managed league, I think it could get scary at times if he goes out and has a couple games where he catches 2, 3, 4 passes and doesn't hit home runs. So I don't know. It worries me a little bit. If I had to rule one out, it's going to be him.
So you have joined the quarterback club now, no longer sans quarterback as we move through this draft. I'm looking at 4 teams, I think, without quarterbacks so far. You are no longer one of them. However, Coop, I do believe you are the only team. Nope, you and Nick Thompson are the only ones without tight ends. Who are some of the tight ends, as the tight end whisperer, who are some of them that you've been most proud of over the years, hitting on late in previous years in the draft that has really carried you to fantasy glory?
Yeah, the very first one we hit, which basically started the whole yin and yang tight end thing, was Mark Andrews. That was the one where everything worked exactly right. We looked at all the metrics, the fact that he was playing snaps at wide receiver, that he wasn't blocking on pass plays, right? That all these things that when you just pour more snaps on there, everything blows up. That's the one that worked out best. But one I have to hang my hat on is just sticking by Evan Engram, because man, Giants fans on Twitter, I'm sure you know, Terp, they get a little crazy, right? They get a little bit. They get a little. I mean, dude, there's such a proud fan base, right?
100%.
It's such a proud city. It's like, dude, when you try and tell them, hey, Evan Engram deserved to make the Pro Bowl the year he made it, and maybe Daniel Jones isn't that good, they don't want to hear that, dude, especially after he gets moved. But what happens next when he goes, he's a top 5 tight end with Eli Manning, plays with Daniel Jones, not that good, goes to play with Trevor Lawrence, top 5 tight end back-to-back years. Last year, second most receptions by a tight end all time. It's like, it's hard for me not to circle back and be like, hey, knuckleheads, I was right. But I try not to do that too much. I'll do it in my articles that are for our members. They're not reading any of that stuff.
Right.
But, yeah, I try not to do it on Twitter, dude, because you don't make a lot of, you got to try and make friends on Twitter.
Balky, I have questions for Coop that
Well, hold on, Farrell. But before you ask him, Coop's on the clock right now.
Oh wow!
Yeah, fire away, dude. I do a million of these.
20,
He's a multitasker.
15 seconds ago. Sorry, Farrell. Just 1 second.
This is much more
All
drama.
right. Yo, you can ask away. I got it.
Yeah, Coop, go ahead. Who are you taking here? Oh, okay. So it's Keon Coleman at the 8:05, a rookie out of Florida State by way of Michigan State. Tell us what you liked about Coleman here as the 45th receiver selected.
Yeah, so I have safety, right? AJ Brown back-to-back 1,500-yard seasons. Brandon Ayuk on a team that, according to PFF, threw the fewest passes of any team that counted as passes, on only 105 targets was good. If he gets traded, he could be even better, right? But and then Hollywood Brown a little risky, but this is where I claw back value, right? This is where everybody else got all these wide receivers that are safe. I need to create some sort of leverage. There are guys later, that I can go into the boring guys that can give me some sort of floor. But you, at a certain point, I feel like you run out of ceiling guys. And a team, we saw what happened with the Vikings when Stephon Diggs left and Justin Jefferson hit. It was wheels up. So I look at that and I say, hey, you know what? Sometimes you get an AJ Brown leaves and the guy that comes in is Treylon Burks and it's not so hot. Sometimes though, right? It's like I know what I'm getting. I know what I'm getting myself into. It's like I know what I signed myself up for here. The floor couldn't be lower. We say the floor is lava with a guy like this, but the ceiling is there's 150. The guy with 150 targets that just packed his bags. So there's targets to be had. So I mean, I'm rooting for Dalton Kincaid because you know what I do for business over here with tight end stuff. But you know what I mean. But hey, got to hedge your bet somehow. Might as well go big here.
Farrell, go ahead. You had some questions.
Well, I have to get permission from you, Balky, before I can ask these questions. No, I do, because some of the players have not been selected yet. And
this is pros versus Joes. I wouldn't worry about the table talk.
All right.
Don't worry about the table talk. And I can also give you guys some tight end stuff before we go, even if I don't pick somebody that can help every one of our listeners.
All right. Well, we want to do that. So, but I got tough questions. Goddard is a tight end that Terp and I agree on. One of our rare agree. Terp and I can disagree without being disagreeable. Well, at least one of us can. But the thing about Goddard being drafted in front of one of my favorite tight ends, Schultz, I'm curious as we talked about all those teams that employ the fullback and what that does for the tight end. Your spot, your breakdown on Schultz, since you don't necessarily think Dell in that offense, it supports the third receiver that well.
Yeah, the problem that I run into with Schultz is that you have to be to have two pass catchers ahead of you. You have to be a unicorn, which George Kittle happens to be. Right, that's the whole thing. Nobody has more 40+ yard plays over the last 7 years than Kittle. He has 16. Travis Kelce has 14. The next highest guy has 7, and it's like Jared Cook, who retired a couple of years ago. Like, tight ends aren't ripping off big plays. Dalton Schultz is a guy that doesn't quite do that. And how many injuries away is he from being a top 2 target on the team? Tank Dell goes down, that doesn't change anything. Stephon Diggs goes down, it's still like it was last year. And last year, when everybody, when those guys were hurt, when Tank Dell or Nico Collins was hurt, he was averaging 7 targets a game. This year, and then when everyone was healthy, he was averaging 4. Right, so Schultz to me, not necessarily a guy I'm going for because he doesn't have the upside standalone. He doesn't have a lot of outs. A guy like Dallas Goedert, he doesn't get a lot of end zone targets. We know that, and he is the third fiddle on the team, but he has 2 outs. With either of those guys getting hurt, AJ Brown's not going to get hurt because they're going to win this league. So let's say Devonta Smith gets hurt. Then all of a sudden now he's getting 8-9 targets a game. So that's why for me, I kind of separate those two guys, but I don't know.
That's how you separate them. What happens if someone is subtracted from that offense? And that's a very clever way to do it. Goddard with the history, Goddard with 59 catches, that's his best. That's Schultz worse. It's hard to understand.
Well, he's safer. Schultz is safer. Not to mention we were playing the game of trying to guess who gets hurt. Well, Dallas Goedert's got to 5 years in a row, right?
And but at some point, I'm curious is when Schultz can't even get out of the double-digit rounds, and I think he's a little more productive than that. But your point is well taken. Isaiah Likely is a tremendous athlete. How do you handle Likely if you're an Andrews drafter?
Yeah, so and then this is a huge thing that I separate leagues like this versus other leagues. In my leagues, if I'm doing a league with 10, 12 teams and it's a hometown draft and we're going like maybe 15, 16 rounds, I will prioritize Mark Andrews because I know that Isaiah Likely as the tight end 20 is going to hit the wire. And I could just drop a bucket of fab on him. He's the only true tight end handcuff for those top guys. If Sam Laporta gets hurt, you're done. You're not starting Shane Zylstra, Brock Wright. With Isaiah Likely, you plugged him in last year. He had top 5 upside. The problem you run into in the draft like this is it's best ball, and Isaiah Likely is getting drafted on his own. And I don't handcuff running backs. I'm damn sure not going to handcuff tight ends. Yeah. So it changes the way I approach it. You know what I mean? The availability of Isaiah Likely, like the safest position you can be in your dynasty league right now is having Mark Andrews with Isaiah Likely on the bench, right? Because you're basically injury proof, right? Mm-hmm. But in certain formats, you can't afford to do that. You can't afford to draft them both, and it's not worth it. So it's such a complex game, man. I love talking ball. Let's go, dude.
It's been a long time since the Grock and Hernandez
right, exactly.
2 tight end situation, but I think we've got one out with the Raiders this year. I see Bowers in that slot off, and I see a lot of 2 tight end sets. How do you handle 2 tight end sets? Have you ever seen one that you love, or is it just the 2 tight end set kind of eats into the player that you think has the highest upside?
And what it boils down to, and we actually kind of saw it with the Eagles, with Dallas Goedert and Zach Ertz. There was one year they were on pace to both be top guys. But the same rule applies. Every tight end won last year, and this isn't every year, but every tight end won in PPR last year was a top 2 target on their team, either first or second, every one of them, by injury or however they ended up there. To be a top 5 tight end, you either need 90 targets or double-digit touchdowns. That's been true going back to 2003 with Randy McMichael, right? Yeah, dog, that's what I'm talking about. So you need the targets and the touchdowns. By hook or by crook, you got to get one of those 2 to hit that upside. Now in best ball, we can get a little crazy because you don't have to set the lineups. Mm-hmm. But in other formats, you gotta set those lineups. Sorry, I'm on the clock right now.
Yeah, Coop you go with another receiver, Cortland Sutton here, wide receiver 48. This is the 5th wide receiver you've drafted tonight, and you're filling in the cracks, right? This is the benefit of taking those running backs early. Now you can scoop up Keon Coleman. You can scoop up Cortland Sutton, a guy who I like both in managed leagues and best ball, and clearly, Coop, you like him in best ball this year.
For sure. And just to finish that question, you need to envision a way for both those guys to be top 2 targets on the team. The answer to that is one of those guys needs to essentially play wide receiver, right? Yeah. Like if, and again, for the Raiders, there's no 2 ways around it. You need Devontae Adams to get hurt or traded, right? Like that's 150 targets, minimum 120. What's the minimum number of targets a healthy Devontae Adams gets?
150.
150, right? Yep. That's what I'm saying. So you need him to get hurt, and then it's possible because then now the game is Jacoby Myers versus Trey Tucker versus they probably move Brock Bowers to split end if that happens because he's basically, I mean, you look at his measurables. I can't even find a 10 in my database to compare this guy to. He's like stronger Jordy Nelson. You know what I mean? So like, I think he's going to be tremendous when the targets are available, but that would be the world where you get there. You would have to have a situation like that. And I think teams don't like building that, which is why it's very difficult to get there.
Does Freiermuth make a comeback?
God, I love it, dude. That's the question. He's already been taken. So
I wrote an article. Ranked tight end or owned tight end so far.
For you?
Yes.
You're so good at this, dude. So I'll tell you, you have, and I wrote an article on this whole thing, kind of debunking some myths with Russell Wilson, right? With his ability and where he throws. This whole idea that he doesn't throw over the middle of the field is not even true, right? I don't even know where that came from. Like his pass rating over the middle of the field has been fine. He had more completions between the numbers than he did outside the numbers. When he had Jimmy Graham, the 2 years he had Jimmy Graham 1 year got 90 targets, the other year he got 10 touchdowns. I mean, those are the barriers to entry, right? And now Deontay Johnson, a guy that's averaged 9 targets a game over the last 4 years, he's gone. It's George Pickens, right? Obviously, he's going to get his, and then it's Freiermuth versus, Calvin Austin and Roman Wilson, he's a rookie. I mean, he could be worth a stab. It's like Van Jefferson. No. Freiermuth is a guy, and they're saying he's moving all over the formation. Not to mention last year in Arthur Smith's offense, Drake London played like 76% of snaps. The next highest wide receiver played 33% of the snaps. Like that mishmash of tight ends and fullbacks, it couldn't be better for Freiermuth. So I'm fully in. I was planning on getting him in this draft. I'm not gonna lie to you. Kyler Murray and Pat Freiermuth, those back-to-back picks there is exactly what I do in a lot of my leagues. But now we just pivot. Here, I'll take a tight end right here when we get on the clock. We can talk about them. And I'll stay on the whole show. I don't care.
Yeah, no.
Kind of
Coop. You're on deck right now, but Jimmy Williams is already pointing out in the YouTube chat saying, don't let Coop go without some tight end talk. We've gotten into some tight end talk,
Jimmy.
But I want to specifically ask you, when you talk about these late round tight ends, as you're on the clock right now, and I'll frame the question this way. I don't expect you to give away all your tight end whispering secrets here on the program, but if you could give us a morsel, such as, are there a lot of late round tight ends that you like this year? Is there only one or two? Because historically, we've seen a tight end come out of nowhere to finish top 5 or at least top 12, seemingly every single year. Sometimes there's more than one. Did you just take one here at the 10:05? Who else do you like?
All right. So I'll give you the number because I have it, Balky. 7 years in a row now, a tight end has come from outside the top 17 in ADP to finish top 5. At least one. Some years too. Like, 1 year, Darren Waller and Mark Andrews did. But Evan Engram has done it twice now. Last year, Laporta was tight end 18 off the board, finished top 5. Finished top 1. Right? So they're out there, and we're going to find them. The cheat code is this. If you had to take one piece of paper, if I take one piece of paper and write down one note, it would be that top 2 target on the team. Right? Obviously, speed helps. All these other things help. But you got to use your imagination. You got to look around and say to yourself, okay, what situation can have a guy emerge and finish either first or second on his team, the way that Sam Laporta did, that Kincaid did, right? You look at a guy like Cole Kmet, who's already been picked here. How many injuries away is he from being
no chance?
Plus, Shane Waldron rotates the tight ends. Not to bash anybody's picks. This is best ball where Cole Kmet's great in the red zone, so he could be fine. You know what I mean? But I look around and I say, okay, with the Patriots, right? Who's the top dogs? Jalen Polk and Javon Baker are getting some hype, but they're rookies. Kendrick Bourne is coming off a torn ACL. Juju Smith-Schuster's looking like he's done. Pop Douglas, not a very big fella. You know what I mean? Hunter Henry's already great versus man-to-man. He managed to score 6 touchdowns on a team that only threw 16 passing touchdowns, which is a miracle by the grace of the Lord. It was even possible. If the Hunter found the hen out 6 times, that's insanity. Not to mention, guess how many screens the Patriots threw last year? Terp, you might know this because I know you follow me on Twitter. But take a guess. How many screens the Patriots threw to the tight ends last year?
I don't remember the number, but a lot.
No, the opposite. The Patriots last year threw 0.
Wow.
0.
Wow.
But it's Alex Van Pelt that threw a lot. So Alex Van Pelt coming in, the Browns last year threw the second most screens to the tight ends. 20 to just David Njoku alone. And I know David Njoku is a better athlete than Hunter Henry, but you take a guy that can win in man-to-man and he can find the end zone, when the opportunity arises, and you sprinkle a couple more manufactured touches on that. Not to mention, he's the captain of the team, and they got all these young players. Very real possibility that he's a top 2 target on the team, maybe even the top target on the team, which makes me very excited for Hunter Henry.
And it makes perfect sense. I mean, this fits. Listen, this is why you watch these shows. You get the tight end whisperer living like what he's doing. He's doing what he tells you to do, and you can do what he's actually doing with Hunter Henry here at the 10:05. Coop, listen, man, this was tremendous. So much good stuff from you. We'll continue to follow you on the X at Coupe Fiasco. Keep up all the great work for Fantasy Alarm, dude. Don't be a stranger. We'll talk soon.
Absolutely, guys. And if you guys feel like that promo code YouTube25, it's a good code. But if it's too long for you, use promo code Coop over at ffpc.com, right? It gets you plugged
like
in.
that.
So.
Yeah.
Thanks, guys.
You're the man. Thank you.
Hey, brother.
Coop, there he was. That was Andrew.
Great
Cooper.
knowledge right there.
Coupe Fiasco on the X. Yin and Yang tight end. That strategy is something that I subscribe to for sure.
100%.
In all my drafts, and I think it comes
All
through tonight in Pros versus Joes as well. Wow, a lot has happened in this draft so far. Guys, let's talk about Nick Thompson's team. We already visited with him earlier in the program, but he starts off with 4 receivers. Farrell follows it up with 5 running backs and James Cook, Walker, Montgomery, Stevenson, and Singletary. He finally gets his first tight end at tight end 15 at the 10:02. Farrell, I'm completely confident he could still carve out some pretty good quarterback play Not as confident about the tight ends. What do you make of his team?
Where in the hell did reality come that he could get all these running backs? This is a fantastic draft the way it's worked out for him. I can't believe all those players were available.
I think, and I know you like Walker. Montgomery, I think we talked about. You like him as well. And the other thing, too, is even if some of these guys go down, he has enough depth there where it's going to work out. Those 4 receivers have to stay healthy. They have to stay available all season. We'll see what he does at tight end. Terp, you probably want to go with 2 more tight ends on that squad from the 11 spot, right?
Yeah, I think I like the way he drafted. Everything looks pretty good. Obviously, the top 4 receivers were out to jump, and then the running backs. I would have probably just taken three other running backs, maybe 4. I would have stopped at Stevenson. I'm outspoken on Singletary. It's not a terrible pick, in the 9th round in this format, but you're so far behind at tight end right now, and if things go a little haywire coming up here, you're going to be far behind at the quarterback position too. I feel like, he should have taken one of those guys that, instead of Devin Singletary, and his team would have been better. Cole Kmet, I know it's best ball. I know he could, fall in the end zone. He obviously is a red zone target, but he's not a guy that I'm targeting at all pretty much this year. I mean, our guest just said, I mean, we're talking about 3 guys ahead of him on the spin.
And maybe
Shane Waldron rotates tight ends. Maybe you got DeAndre Swift as a 4th.
There you go. Yeah.
I mean, I don't see any format where I'll target him. He's a guy that I don't care where I'd rather take guys that are way down the list that present a little bit more upside. To me, he's going to have an annoying game here and there, but I just feel like in that offense with those weapons on the outside, with a rookie quarterback who's a little bit of an unknown, even though where he got drafted. To me, he's just not a guy that I would take.
The other squad that was getting some love from the YouTube chat earlier in the program is Pat Kerrane from the 2 spot tonight. From Legendary Upside, no running backs until the 8th round, very on brand. We get it. Lamb, Collins, Flowers, Worthy, Reed, Pitts, and Jackson are the tight end and quarterback here, and now he's filling in the cracks at running back. Brooks, Brian Robinson, Elliott, and now Benson. Farrell, I think the one that seems weird to me, if any of these picks seem weird, Xavier Worthy, about a round ahead of ADP. It is best ball, so you want the explosive players. You think he reached too much on Worthy here?
Not with the guys he has. And not, he wants to have Worthy in this contest. We don't want to keep repeating the rules. That's the kind of guy that's going to win the contest for you. So good enough. I doubt if he would draft him that earlier. In different type of format.
Right. And that
makes really, really good 0 RB team. I mean, might not agree with all the players, but I mean,
well, the Flowers Jackson stack back to back is pretty
Flowers
nice
Jackson, and you're getting Jaden Reed, who's falling a little bit down draft boards right now. Worthy is, the press continues to get better in camp. Obviously Collins and Lamb and Pitts.
He can get 10 points a game out of those running backs.
Yeah, Brian Robinson's a guy that I've been targeting enough, and I hear sarcasm. Don't forget Zeke, not a bad pick at all.
Right.
But Jonathan Brooks is the question. I mean, Jonathan Brooks is a guy that we don't know. Chuba Hubbard's getting a little bit more press, in the last couple of days. He's a guy that I've been drafting who's pretty much been free in drafts. I just think he's not going away. I know a lot of people don't think he's any good, but he's going to be on that offense, especially if Brooks isn't ready for the season. He's going to be the guy. Miles Sanders is I haven't heard a word about him during camp. So it's one of the best 0 RB teams I've seen drafted so far. I mean, the pros so far, I know I'm always biased toward the pros versus the Joes, but there's 3 really good pros teams in this draft so far.
The other thing I should point out, and Jack Senzone, I apologize, Jack, pointing out in the YouTube chat right now that by drafting Xavier Worthy at the 6'11", he prevented the FFPC Joe's team of McIntyre and Van from getting the Mahomes-Worthy pairing, which
it's okay. He got the better player anyway.
Right.
Play a little defense.
Play a little defense with Xavier Worthy for sure.
Don't worry about the defense. You got Christian Watson. You're fine.
You got to speak to your truth, Turp, because when you talk about Ezekiel Elliott, the listeners just tear, man. They weep. They just know that you're not.
I get DMs sometimes from Dallas fans who have heard me being outspoken on Zeke, and they're getting emotional. I mean, Zeke is not a guy that I've said many nice things about.
Gotta stay legitimate with the listeners. That's what keeps the listeners.
It's a year-by-year thing. We try to switch it up every year. Don't get caught up in last year.
You haven't switched anything.
Just like Coop said, Tank Dell, you start talking about Tank Dell, people get a little butthurt. Tank Dell was a darling last year.
Tank Dell's
coming off the injury.
We're talking about Zeke, and you don't need to talk about how much you love.
I'm just saying. We're going to be in Vegas, and I'm going to find a way to take Zeke and then just walk over to your table, get a picture right in front, get some likes on it.
Well, I'm not saying you won't take him. It's just you'll hold your nose and take him. We know where your heart is.
It's all about trying to win $1 million. I don't care how I get there.
Yeah.
Here's what I'm going to do here. We have a couple of guests right now. What I'm going to do here is here's what I'm going to do. Okay. Here's what I'm going to do.
What are we going to do?
You're trying to bring them all on at the same time.
I don't want to bring them all on it. No, I don't want to
do it. Do it, Balky.
Here's the problem. This is what happens when you're host, producer, and engineer. All of
Balky, you're genius. Whatever you do.
Aiden, wake him up.
It's gonna be perfect.
It's not that. We might be having some connection issues with one of them. So what we're gonna do here, we're gonna go to our next guest here. You know him as the runner-up in the 2014 FFPC Main Event. He is drafting tonight from the 3 spot, along with his co-manager Jeff Conklin. You follow him on the X at Dan Side of Bacon. Please welcome in Dan Side and Fadden. Dan Side and Faden, excuse me. Dan, welcome in.
That was smooth.
Internet looking good? No, maybe not.
Isn't he a Cowboys fan?
He's froze. He's froze.
There he is. He's there.
Did we get him?
Yeah, he's there.
Hold on.
There he is.
Dan, we got you? Apparently not.
I think he might.
We got you.
Yeah, he's a Cowboys
hey,
fan
Terp.
for sure.
I remember. They just. Oh my God! More Cowboys fans I got to put up with.
Dan, how do you like your squad? How do you like your squad so far? You and Jeff drafting from the 3 spot as you're coming up on your 12th round pick.
We're having some issues there, Bob.
Yeah. Oh, we are. Yeah.
Hey, Maurice Jenkins is it? Maurice.
We
Jenkins.
like it. We were surprised. Pacheco. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah, you're coming through. Just delayed.
Yep.
Really delayed.
What a bummer.
All right, here's what I'm going to do. Dan,
let me go off. I'll try to come back on.
Okay, that sounds good. Dan is going to pop back on. That's okay. I do have another guest lined up right now, so we can pop him on. You know his work over at the Rotowire. You know him from what has he all done? The Kings Classic. He's hosting all these shows coming up prior to the NFL draft, a marathon of interviews that he does prior to the start of the fantasy football season, prior to the start of the NFL draft. A guy that you hear him on SiriusXM Fantasy Sports Radio as well. You follow him on the X at Jim Coventry NFL. It is Jim Coventry popping on tonight. Jim, good evening. How are you? And most importantly, how do you like your draft so far?
Always a great day to play football, talk football, be here. Thanks for having me. The draft is fun. This is going well. I didn't think I'd draft 2 running backs early. I got off that train at the end of last year. And then Saquon sitting there in the 2nd round with 4 picks up. I couldn't pass on him. I wanted to take Mark Andrews there, but there was no choice. I got Barkley and Brees. I was fine with that. And then, then we're going to go wide receivers after that. And, it's funny. Waddle is coming off 2 years ago, puts up 1,300 yards. Last year, limping all over the field, right and left. 1,100 yards, looked terrible, but he's healthy, good. And Cooper, I reached for Cooper a little bit. He's averaging 1,200 yards in his 2 years with Cleveland, and actually played 5 games with Watson last year. He had 90 yards in 4 of those 5 games, and only one of those games it was 10 targets. So, and Christian Kirk, he was on pace for 1,200. He was close to that 2 years ago. So overall, it was fun. It's been a fun draft.
It's been a good draft.
Yeah, for sure.
Very good draft.
You got some love from Andrew Cooper earlier, Jim, when he was talking about that back-to-back pick of Murray and Freiermuth. I think the ADP would say you reached a little bit on both those players, but I also think as we keep drafting more and more teams over the next 5-6 weeks, whatever it is, I think where you got him tonight, that might be a bargain for him come late August, come early September on both Murray and Freiermuth.
You know, Murray played in 7 of his last 8 games. He was between 19.5 and 25 fantasy points. And coming off the ACL, his running started to pick up a little bit, full year removed. Look, I mean, realistically, Trey McBride was his number 1 option for like 4 games because Marquise Brown was hurt. Michael Wilson was out. Now they get Harrison, they got Wilson, they got Freiermuth. Connor had a 654 and a 67-yard receiving game with Kyler. I wasn't going to take Murray, but I actually went to Prescott, and I'm like, you know what? It's a 4-point per passing touchdown. Give me Murray. Give me the rushing upside here. It was around early because I wanted Freiermuth. I knew Freiermuth would not get to me in the 8th. And if we think about Arthur Smith, realistically, we think, oh, he crushed Kyle Pitts. Jonnu Smith had 582 yards. I looked at the tight end target numbers in all the years Smith's been coaching. Tight ends are commonly getting over 100 targets. That was multiples, but realistically, Darnell Washington's not going out for pass routes. He's a blocker. He's an offensive lineman. So, you know, all that said, Freiermuth is probably the number 2 option because if you think about Roman Wilson, they play 80% heavy personnel. Is there really a place for a slot receiver in that? Probably not. Calvin Austin's tiny. So I don't think there's any world where Freiermuth isn't the number 2. And in a tight end premium league, I would be shocked if he doesn't keep up with some of the players that are ahead of him.
Jim, you're preaching to the choir in regards to both Murray and especially Freiermuth. I think I'm finding a lot more Freiermuth fans as we continue to do these shows, continue to talk to high-stakes players as well. The Nick Chubb news that came out today that I can't remember who it was within the Browns organization. They said he still has a ways to go or a little bit to go in his rehab, I think was the phrase that was used. Do you still view him at the 1104 as a bargain? Is that just where he should be going? How do you feel about Chubb right now?
It's probably right. He's my running back 4. I expect 4 weeks of pup. That's a full expectation. Minimum 4 weeks of pup, maybe another 3 or 4 weeks of limited snaps. But I have Breece Hall and I have Barkley. I just need somebody for, week 9, 10 and beyond. I want somebody for down the stretch. And as a running back 4, I just need him for down the stretch. Because if Barkley and Hall aren't getting done for me, I'm losing the league anyway.
Right. Yeah, that's true. That's 100% accurate. No question. You are coming up as the on deck here after Seidenfaden and Conklin make their pick at the 13:03. You are now on the clock. Kyler Murray and Kirk Cousins are the quarterbacks. You have 1 tight end right now in Freiermuth. Hall, Barkley, Chase Brown, and Chubb in the backfield. Waddle, Cooper, Christian Kirk, Addison, and Joshua Palmer out wide. What are we thinking here, Jim, at the 13:04?
So I made a mistake. I like Joshua Palmer where I got him, but I had Luke Musgrave as either of them. And I was kind of thinking Musgrave would make it back around me. He went away the next pick. And I would have liked Musgrave because you got to have a second tight end. So I am looking at tight end now. It's going to dry up quick. Fant went, and we all like Fant. And actually, Fant went later than some of these drafts. He's 12th round recently in some of these drafts. So all that said, I got 20 seconds left here. The foot injury is supposed to be fine to start the season. I don't need him in week 1 anyway. So I am going to take my chance on Juwan Johnson here as my second tight end. Down the stretch, he played well. Click Kubiak comes in. So we're going to get a lot of play action. And this is funny. Very small sample size for Derek Carr, but with under play action, Derek Carr was number 1 passer in the league. It was a small, like 53 attempts or something, but he was the best play action quarterback. And he's accurate when he's clean. Well, under play action at Kubiak, those passes down the seam could be useful. Olave is a big beneficiary, but I'm not excited about Juwan Johnson. I would have much preferred Luke Musgrave, but at this point, a couple rounds later, you've got to have multiples because obviously it's a best ball league.
Right. Jim, can you reiterate a little bit what you said? Palmer was a mistake before at the 10:09
instead of Luke Musgrave. Having another tight end was way more important than having a 5th wide receiver. Way more important.
So you still like Palmer? You just thought for your structure, it would have been better for Musgrave.
I tried to play that cute poker game, thinking the player would come back to me. And what an idiot! Next pick, I'm like, yeah, that's a brilliant move. I know Palmer wouldn't have made it back either. That fair enough because he would not have made it back. I don't think.
I was just going to say tonight that I've noticed over the last week sort of the tightening up of the Bengals running back situation between Moss and Chase Brown, and Chase Brown was really closing the gap on Moss. Well, my friend, you took Chase Brown over Zach Moss tonight. You get him at the 904. Moss falls at the 906. As we move forward here, you think Chase Brown's going to continue climbing and Zach Moss will continue falling?
A little bit. I think Moss will still get the edge. I think people are buying into the free agent contract. It wasn't a lot of money, but they see that Zach Moss, look, overall, his numbers were good. But if we compartmentalize what Moss did, he ended 2022 with 4 really good games at the Colts. And then last year, while Taylor was on PUP, he was 5 yards a carry. Many people don't realize from week 5 on, Zach Moss turned back into a pumpkin, 3.92 yards per carry from week 5 on. He had a very good run blocking offensive line. Now you go over to Cincinnati, run blocking is going to be as good. This team, the Bengals, need explosive plays, and Zach Moss isn't giving them that. Brown could give you explosive plays as a receiver. He'll get a few carries a game to start, but if all of a sudden the offense is humming because defenses are playing a shell, you got Jamar Chase, you got T. Higgins. I don't know if Burton's going to play the slot or they're talking about Yoshi Vosh getting some reps there, but they're going to be able to challenge. And there's going to be a lot of room at the second level wide open. And Zach Moss is probably not going to take best advantage of that.
Jim, tell us, remind us where we can consume more of your content, both on SiriusXM and Rotowire.
Yeah, I mean, everything funnels through the X at Jim Coventry NFL. Rotowire just started a football-only YouTube channel. We got over 100 preseason videos up there. They're all short, 8 to 10 minutes, things like that. But we're firing those out every single day. That's a great place to catch it. And again, you can find that through the X or just going to the YouTube page. Rotowire is a subscription site. If you go to rotowire.com/Jim, no credit card, will give you 2 days all access. You can check that out. SiriusXM on the weekends, 1 to 3 Eastern.
1 to 3 Eastern on the weekends when you can hear Jim Coventry on SiriusXM Fantasy Sports Radio. Check out his latest pieces over at rotowire.com, including the ADP battle that he analyzed between Joe Mixon, James Cook, and Alvin Kamara, as well as 5 undervalued receivers that you'll want to take a look at in your FFPC drafts this year. Jim, thank you so much. We'll continue following you on the X at Jim Coventry NFL, and don't be a stranger. In fact, I'll be talking with you soon on one of your streams, which I'm very excited about.
You're going to be on the marathon. Super excited about that. It'll be like 4 days after the Fantasy Football Expo, that Thursday and Friday. Right. You won't want to miss that on Rotowire YouTube, and Bulky will be there. Guys, you do a phenomenal job with this every single year. You guys crush it. Appreciate you. Have a wonderful rest of the time.
You do the same, Jim. Thank you so much. Jim Coventry from Rotowire popping aboard the show tonight as we are the thing is, sometimes I get lost in the analysis. I love covering these live drafts with you guys, but sometimes I'm paying so much attention to what the guest is saying, I sometimes forget that we have a draft going on.
An actual draft behind us.
All right. So Terp, lay it on us here. We've seen a lot of picks go off the board here. Anything standing out to you over the last few rounds? I mean, we talked a little bit about Pat Kerrane squad. We talked a little bit about Nick Thompson squad. We've obviously talked to Cooper. We've talked to Coventry. There's a lot of interesting drafts unfolding in front of us. What do you make of what we've seen over the last 10 minutes or so?
I mean, a lot of good picks. A lot of teams that I've said have been the best continue to just make very good picks. I mean, I think this is a pros-dominated draft so far. I know Mr. Elliott over here, is rolling his eyes again because I'm biased toward people.
You know all the pros. You don't know any.
I do know all the pros. I know some of the Joes. We're gonna have a Joe on here soon as the Cowboys fans. I'm never gonna say he had a good team, even though his team's not bad. Hopefully, he's not listening. But I just think that they're just outsmarting the Joes tonight. Some of these pro teams are just.
All right, let's talk about Joes that are always smart. Let's go to that number 9 spot, Turp. Tell me how these guys are getting. Tell me how FPI is getting outsmarted. They just took 2 of your favorite wide receivers in the 13th and 14th round.
I don't mind their roster at all.
No, we need more enthusiasm than that. You don't mind their roster?
I'm not a Joe Burrow guy. I'm not a Joe Burrow guy this year.
Have you seen that new haircut, Turp?
Great haircut, good-looking guy. A lot of love Joe Burrow the player, but the wrist injury just scares me. I know they say he's 100%. He looks a little alien. Say anything else?
He's got a lot of spare parts in those knees and everything.
He does. I mean, Dalton Schultz. We talked about him. Not really the biggest fan of. Love the Brock Purdy pick. He continues to just get undervalued in drafts right now. McLaughlin, love him. Dotson. I'm a Pop Douglas guy. He's a guy that is a target of mine in best ball. Godwin is one of my favorite receivers this year. I just did 2 best ball drafts with the FFPC and made sure I got Godwin in both of them. He's just, if he plays in the slot, I mean, you could be talking about a second-round pick by the time the year's over.
I am going to personally invest funds that I have squirreled away underneath my bed for a rainy day into getting these guys a show where they can be pros next year and you can like their team.
There's plenty of pro teams that I don't like, but I'm really confident that a pro out of this league will win the overall.
I will say
some good ones.
Very good drafts.
Brad Petra and Darren Larson from the 9 spot, whose team we're talking about. I do think that the structure is strong. They drafted a few players that I'm not a huge fan of, but I think it kind of fits in with what they're doing here. And they did draft some players I do like quite a bit. I love it. I'm with Terp. I like the Godwin pick here. I think Trey McBride makes a lot of sense at the 204. Jacoby Myers, I think, is an undervalued player again this year at the 1109. And I thought Jaleel McLaughlin is a good pick to grab at 1204 just to see what happens there. Huge upside. That's what you want. You're trying to win first place in this format. Otherwise, you don't get no Coke, as Danny Noonan would say. Let's move on to our we're going to bring him back on right now because we have a limited time with him. He's drafting from the 3 spot with Jeff Conklin. Dan Side of Bacon on the X. It is Dan Seiden Faden. Dan, welcome back onto the show, man. Oh, hold on. Is he muted? Is he muted? No, he's not muted. Check your phone, Dan. Are you muted right now? You might be. I'm not sure because we cannot hear you, unfortunately. We got you now, Dan. Dan, can you hear us? Negative? Oh. No, he just unmuted, so it should be good.
Dan!
It's so close. No.
Come on, Dan.
Is it playing through your car? It might be playing through your car. I don't know. I'm guessing. I'm trying to engineer something. I'm not there right now, so I cannot figure it out. But we're trying.
Oh,
very trying. All right, Dan. See if you can.
Muting a Cowboys fans. It's such a sad occurrence.
See if you can troubleshoot that, Dan, and we'll bring you back on for sure. We'll get back into the draft until we can talk to Dan here, which is unfortunate because I like the team that he's building here from the 3 spot. Farrell, if you have a top 4 pick in the FFPC this year, do you feel like you have to make sure that you grab one of those top 3 running backs in McCaffrey, Robinson, and Hall?
No, I don't. But yes, I will. They're too hard to live without. And when you were talking, Boggy, about how we always see these 3 backs going off this early in the top 5, we won't see that at Planet Hollywood on every board. So some guy's going to get assigned to 1, and he's wanted Tyreek Hill, or he's wanted some receiver, and by damn, he's going to draft him. And that's one of the things I like about the last drafts of the year. But yeah, I've got enough of those receivers. I've drafted enough of your Jefferson and Chase falling to me later, where when I get there, I've already got those players. Does that make sense?
It does. I think it does. Yeah.
The running backs aren't falling outside of maybe Breece Hall.
Exactly.
If you want Robinson, he's a lock in the top 5 right now. Right. He might slip to 6, but I doubt it. But Hall, you might get a chance at 6 and 7. But I feel like, by the time we, get later in the season, it's going to be clear-cut top 5 picks. It's going to come down to
I watched the draft
Chase
last
Jefferson.
year live on Saturday, maybe Friday. McCaffrey went as the 7th pick. Now, there might have been extenuating circumstances of that, but it never happened in my league if I'm there. So
the other thing too that I did pick up the first time we had Dan on, where he was talking about the Pacheco pick at 410, and if you look at the ADP on Pacheco again in the FFPC Best Ball Tournament at FantasyMojo.com is where I get this ADP. You saw Darren Armani. He's the guy who runs Fantasy Mojo. He runs the Pros versus Joes, puts it together every single year. If you're playing in the FFPC, strongly suggest you get a subscription to FantasyMojo.com. But I'm looking at it right now. 410 is where they got him. He normally goes up to 310. Great value on Pacheco there. And it sounds like they didn't plan on grabbing him there. But Terp, this goes to like the whole drafting in the FFPC. Every draft is a unicorn. You have to be able to pivot and acquire that value on your team when it's presented to you.
Yeah, I mean, you go into every draft with some sort of plan, but you got to be able to adapt on the fly. I mean, some of these drafts get a little crazy. Guys fall if they shouldn't. I mean, Isaiah Pacheco this late to me is a very good pick. I mean, it's I've seen him go in the beginning of the third round in drafts. I mean, he's pretty much a stalwart in the third round in all these drafts to
right
get him
in
where
the
he
middle.
got him. I mean, it's hard to say no to that. I mean, what's his downside? Who's behind him that you're really worried about? CEH, dust. Deneric Prince, he'll be another camp darling, but is he any good? I mean, are they going to add somebody to that room? Probably not. It's not really their MO. So what's his? I mean, he going to get all the goal line work. They're going to give him a ton of carries, and if he stays healthy, it's a gift at 410. Gift.
We are getting some conversation with Jeff Conklin, who is Dan's co-manager in this league tonight. He said rounds 3 through 7 just kind of wild everywhere from what we've seen. And I would imagine that, these pros versus Joes, we say FFPC drafts are unicorns. Pros versus Joes drafts are like unicorns on steroids because you really don't know what the pros are capable of when they step into this. Yeah. And I know the Joes, I think we saw Adam Krautwurst talking about this on X today, that they're going to show off a little bit tonight from the 10 spot. And I think they're having some fun there. They're not streaming, so they're like uber paying attention. They're on the clock right now in the 16th round. Guys, as we look at their team from the 10 spot, they ended up starting off with Garrett Wilson and Travis Kelce, but they've added some explosive young players on here. Malik Neighbors, Anthony Richardson, Brock Bowers, Roma Dunze, Marshawn Lloyd, Jalen Wright, Ricky Pearsall now here in the 15th. They have about 30 seconds on the clock here in the 16th. Farrell, I'm seeing a lot of rookies on this squad, and perhaps that might not be the worst way to go to try to win a pros versus Joes league this year.
Okay, but I think they're playing darts. I think they're
he doesn't like the running back room. Tale as old as time.
There's a lot of running backs in that room. That is a crowded room.
Yeah, it is. I mean, it's a tough. I'm a big fan of this team. I would love to build a team like this, especially in best ball, because if one of those Jalen Williams, Javonte Williams is your anchor, the rest of those guys are going to be fine. You're going to get serviceable weeks every week from one of them. You only need one. Everything else in that team is very good. 2 elite tight ends, 2 very good quarterbacks. Obviously, the receivers are really good. And if for some reason the Bears, blow up and it's Odunze and DJ Moore, this could be an overall winner. I mean, it's one of the 3 teams that I said were one of the best in the league. I know them, but still no bias whatsoever. If I don't like your team, I'm going to tell you this is one of the best drafts I've seen.
Farrell, what gives you pause about the running backs? Is it the lack of high-end draft capital?
Yeah, and they've all got such a huge job to do just to get on the field, just to get not even what they're going to do once they get on the field. They got to accomplish a situation. Either somebody's got to get hurt. I like what they're doing, but then they got carried away with it. You got to stick a Jacoby Myers in there somewhere and get you 75.
What's Jacoby Myers going to do for you?
Going to get you 75 catches, 8 touchdowns. When Odunze catches what he's going to catch,
I'm outspoken.
When Adonis Mitchell never sees the field and becomes this year's Pierce.
He has a lot of rookies. They have a lot of rookies.
They got a lot of rookies and
a lot of rookies. Jacoby Myers.
I don't think that we're going to rewrite the book in 2024. That we're going to rewrite the book that this class of drafted rookies is going to somehow score more points in fantasy ball and have more production in real-time football than other rookie classes have in previous years. And I like taking your pick. I like taking your shots with rookies. I like putting rookies on a team where where I can make an idea that a player's going to step up. But that's not particularly going to happen here.
It's a lot of rookies. It's a risk.
Yeah.
But in this format, why not? If it all pans out, it's a league winner.
Well,
if it's not, it's the 12th team. It's the 12th place, and who cares?
But to
these guys care. That's they're drafting to win.
Exactly. That's why they're taking all the rookies. They're drafting to win.
Oh, come on. Taking all the rookies is never a prescription.
It's risky, but if you look at the data, taking a lot of rookies in best ball is very, very profitable.
But I would say it's profitable when you're doing it prior to the start, before the NFL draft. I think that's where you cash in a lot of the value. I will say, Terp, to push back a little bit and kind of what Farrell's saying, I do think rookies can be the way to win a league like this. I also think that too many rookies, where you get drunk on rookies, could be a death knell for you. Now, I'm not saying that's what they did here, but if you look at the way that this squad is struck, we've been spending a lot of time talking about the rookie running backs with Marshawn Lloyd and Wright and all these guys, and then obviously Caleb Williams. Bowers is going to be a huge cog on this team because that's their second tight end. But Malik Neighbors, Rome Odunze, two of the receivers that they had drafted in their top, out of the top 4 receivers they drafted, 2 of them are rookies, and 2 of them are also Chicago Bears. Now, if Caleb Williams goes ham this year, it's going to be fantastic because Odunze and Moore are going to be huge catalysts for it. I think the point that Farrell's making, and I kind of see what he's saying, you don't need to draft all the rookies, but a good number of them.
Fair point.
And
they definitely got a little excited. There's a lot of rookies on the team.
Yeah,
but he's patting the table for Jacoby Myers. I mean, I'm not a Jacoby Myers hater.
Well, but now we're into personal preference, and I get that Myers probably has a high floor. I don't know how high his ceiling is, but week to week, at least he would give you something.
They'll be hard pressed to find some of these guys with 75 catches, 8 touchdowns. And Jacoby Myers might be hard pressed himself to produce that this year, but you need that kind of guy on a fantasy football team, I would think. Here we are knocking on the door of August, and they're drafting a bunch of kids that, quite honestly, they're going to have to stop practice several times in these locations just to make sure these guys know how to line up. At least draft somebody who knows where to line up. That's a good way to start.
Right. Yes, that would be a great start. Michael Gonzalez pointing this out too with Zamir White at the 8-12 tonight, I think it was. 8-12 tonight to Todd McIntyre's team that he is running with Curtis Van. They get him at the 8-12. Normally 7:02 is where he goes off the board. Huge value. Are people sleeping on one of your Raiders, Farrell, and Zamir White?
No, he's not a rookie, so he's not going to get.
Now one of your Raiders, are they? No, hold on. Are they sleeping on White this year now that Josh Jacobs is gone?
No, but yes, they are. In this draft, they slept on White.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So that's
I think middle ground on Zamir White this year. People either like him, like myself, or just absolutely despise him. They're calling him.
And I'm not on either. I'm right in the middle with this guy, and I think
there's not many people that are on the middle with him. It's one or the other, and I like that. I like being on the side. Most people are on the side that they don't like him. He doesn't. He's not going to be involved in the passing game.
I want to see him, and once I see him, I may be sold.
Call him Zeus. He's ready.
Part of it
round all day, every day.
Yeah, I agree, Turk.
Part of it is, as Jack Senzone points out in the YouTube chat right now, Dylan Lobby is getting some praise from his coaches, and he's coming on a little bit. So we'll talk about him. He hasn't been picked yet, but we'll talk about him when he does. Terp, you mentioned that Zamir White is kind of a polarizing player. Let's open up the floor to some other polarizing players in the FFPC this year. Not necessarily guys that you and Farrell are really on or really off of, but who are some of the other guys like Zamir White that it seems like either you like him or you don't like him at all? Like he's either going to be on a bunch of your teams or on zero. Who are some of the other players going?
Two players I'll read off real quick. Number one is Javonte Williams. I mean, all the negative press that's been surrounding him going up until this previous week, he was going to get cut. They didn't even know if he was going to make the team over P. Ryan. Now he's running with the ones. The coach is saying how great he is. He lost all his weight. But there's still people out there like myself who don't have much Javonte Williams and likely won't have much Javonte Williams. I just think the other guys behind him are going to be, more involved than people think. And then another player is right up Balky's alley is Dontavius Wicks. I mean, everybody is in love with the guy. I mean, everybody keeps talking about, how he's, going to take the next step and be the number one receiver on that team, and Watson who, and Reed who, and Dobbs what. Like, as for as much as everybody loves him, he's not moving up in drafts. He's moving up a little bit, but I mean, this is probably the earliest in the 12th round. I mean, 12th round with all the hype that's surrounding him. I mean, I'll have some just because I think he's a good player, but he's not on the talent level of Jaden Reed, and he's definitely not on the talent level of Christian Watson. I think he's going to be, involved, But Green Bay runs a lot of 2 wide receiver sets. And Christian Watson, Jaden Reed, or Christian Watson and Romeo Dobbs, unless an injury happens, are going to be the guy.
You know, Jordan Love said when he was asked point blank, who is a guy that's going to have a big year this year, and he said Dontavian Wicks is going to have a monster year, which is fine in theory, right? I like the player. I think he's super talented.
I like the player too. Nothing against the player,
right? But the issue is, Terp, you're kind of leading into it. Watson, Dobbs, Musgrave, Reed, Josh Jacobs,
Tucker Kraft's not going anywhere.
There's so many.
They're going to be running the ball. AJ Dillon, and you saw that thing that came out today. Josh Jacobs and AJ Dillon, great 1-2 punch.
Yeah, I think Marshawn Lloyd might be a little overdrafted at this point. Marshawn Lloyd could be one of those rookie running backs that gets off to a slow start. They've been, listen, they're talking about what great shape Dillon's in right now, and
we know how much you love AJ Dillon.
No, I don't. He's a great ambassador for Northeast Wisconsin. But he's an all right football player.
He's a very all right football player.
He's a very all right football player. The other pick I wanted to talk about here that we were just Javonte Williams. Sean Green, who drafted last night, Terp, wants to know, are you a McLaughlin better or greater sign than Javonte? Now, I'll set it up here for you so you can talk about this. Javonte Williams, 9-12. Jaleel McLaughlin, 12-10. That's ADP for the FFPC Best Ball Tournament, about 3 rounds difference. But you're loving the value on McLaughlin over Javonte Williams here.
I am, especially in this format. He's always going to be out there. He's a smaller back, and that's, going to limit his upside. But it seems like the coaching staff's a big fan of him. I mean, they keep talking about this kid from Notre Dame, Estime, who I think is going to be maybe not right at the beginning of the season. But if Javonte Williams, who's probably going to get the first crack, falters at all, Sean Payton isn't going to just put him out there if he looks as dusty as he did last year. He lost weight. He looks good, but nobody hit him yet. No, the pads aren't on. Preseason hasn't started. It's just practice. So we talk about, there's so many pieces that come around on how great guys are, and it's hard not to get caught up in the sauce because you see all the positive stuff that comes out and not much negative stuff outside of Kendre Miller being hated by his coach. Most of it's all positive. So you got to weed through some of the crap, and I think the Javonte Williams hype is going to get a lot of drafters making a mistake.
Farrell, you said earlier that you wanted to see Zamir White play before you kind of made you took a stance on him. We've heard, I mentioned this.
You saw him play at the end of the year last year.
Right. Yes,
I want to see him play this year.
Dylan Lobby, 1708 tonight, goes to Andrew Cooper from Fantasy Alarm. I alluded to it earlier. He's getting some praise from the Raiders. How do you feel about him at that ADP?
Raiders are proud of their draft. They like this guy. He's the Raider mentality. He played college football at New Hampshire, Balky.
Was it New Hampshire? I got to look this up.
I think it was New Hampshire. Okay, and he, he's been running around in shorts, looks good, and brings the energy to the team, and he's probably going to do well on kickoff returns. New Hampshire, the Patriot League is not on the schedule this year for this player, so he's got, there's a big curve in front of him. I like him for a guy to throw a dart at, in the 17th round, but, by then I would probably want to do something different. Do you think that the Denver press kind of pulls an April Fool's on us every year? They seem to come up with they seem to come up with a bunch of nonsense about their players. Didn't they say that the quarterback last year was about ready to get cut, at the start of the season with Wilson? And
that was a narrative, yes.
Yeah, and, maybe that has more legs than the Javonte Williams situation. When you talk about, is this coach going to be invested in Williams? 200 carries last year. It's more carries than Williams ever had before. And now they view him as healthy, and they're talking about his physique and physicality. I like Williams here in the 9th round. I don't want to push him up that board too far. I like the fact that that's where he's been drafted, and that's where he's kind of staying. So, I think Williams at that point, very, very good pick.
Guys, back to Nick Thompson's draft here from the 11 spot. This was the squad that went 4 straight running backs and then 5 straight receivers. So the running back room and the receiver room were pretty crowded over the course of the first half of the draft. What do you make of the second half of the draft here and how he addressed both tight end and quarterback? Komet, Hawkinson, and Gesicki at tight end. Tagovailoa and Will Levis are the quarterbacks. Terp, I'll let you weigh in on this first. Knowing that he didn't draft either one of those positions in the first 9 rounds, how did he do?
Tight ends are a massive question to me. I mean, I talked about Cole Kmet already. Hawkinson, we just don't know. And in this format, he could be out the first 4 weeks. He could be out longer. We don't know. He's not a guy that I'm targeting a ton, especially with the quarterback play. That's massive unknown right now. I think this is Justin Jefferson, and that's it from the skill positions, not the running backs. Tua, I like him. Who'd you say he drafted earlier? Does he have Waddle? I don't think so. And
no, there is
no stacks.
Right.
I mean, I think if you're drafting Tua, you got to draft him with one of those two because he presents no rushing upside at all. He's never given you anything rushing wise. So to me, that's a pick I would have passed on. Will Levis is my Jordan Love this year. He's my highest owned quarterback, and I don't see any downside in the player where he's being drafted. I feel like he has QB1 upside. I feel like he's going to get there. They're going to throw the ball a lot more. Ridley, Hopkins, Tyler Boyd, all are guys I'm targeting a ton in best ball. Not really that much Boyd, but where he's being drafted, he's not bad. The other receivers, Mike Williams, he's going to have some games, and then he's going to get hurt.
Terp, what do you make of getting Williams and Corley on the same squad?
I'm a big Corley guy. Corley's a guy I've been drafting a lot. Where he's being drafted, in the late, he's a guy that I think could easily be behind Garrett Wilson as the second, target guy on the team. Mike Williams is going to be there. He's going to be annoying, but he's also coming off another major injury. Mm-hmm. So he's a guy that I probably won't have much of this year. And Quentin Johnson, he's a stiff. Like he's you want to find I'm mad at myself because on one of me and Aiden's first shows last year, I said I wouldn't draft Quentin Johnson in the 50th round. And I caught up in the sauce of the preseason a little bit and added some Quentin Johnson. Not a lot, but just enough to be annoying. And watching him play, he's just a terrible football player.
I don't want to make any judgments on him, like final judgments on him for the, after his rookie season, but it was bad. It was not average or below average. It was bad. And he's one of those players, Farrell, and we'll get your take on Quentin Johnston here, but he's one of those players in my rookie drafts. I was never a big fan of his, and I ended up drafting him in a few rookie drafts just because, like, they're FOMO picks. Like, I'm like, well, just in case he's good, at least I'll have a couple of shares of him. Totally regret those picks, Farrell. How do you feel about Quentin Johnston in year 2?
I really like the body type and athleticism, but he could not put it together. And, it might have annoyed Terp to have that player on his team, but it annoyed everyone that drafted him there in the NFL because all those guys have a job somewhere else or are still looking that drafted him, So
right,
he's joining the crowd.
He is joining the crowd, and we're going to go to add one more person to our crowd here tonight. Third time's the charm, God willing. From drafting from the 3rd spot tonight, Dan Seidenfaden. Dan,
just can't get rid of you.
Do we have you now? Can you hear us?
Can you guys hear me?
Yes. All right.
Yes.
We got it. Boom.
Yes.
Fantastic.
HSFF Hour 1, Internet 0. Well, Internet probably put a couple on the board tonight, but we get the last lap. Dan, let's talk about your team. I know last time when you were on the air, you were talking a little bit about the Pacheco pick. He fell basically a full round to you guys at 410.
Yeah, we were going to go Bijan. We were going to go hero running back. We weren't looking at running back until our second running back, probably till 8, 9, 10. But then Pacheco fell, and we got an inside man in Kansas City. Jeff, that's where he lives.
Right.
And when Pacheco fell that far, he's like, I know we wanted to go wide receiver, but you got to take him. There's no one here to back him up. And he thinks he's going to have a real good year.
The other thing I noticed about your first 4 receivers, and they all have something in common here, Devontae Adams, T. Higgins, Deontay Johnson, DeAndre Hopkins. These are all guys that at one time were held really, really in high regard. I don't think any of these guys are coming onto the age cliff, especially when you consider Deontay Johnson. I think he's a type of receiver that could play deep into, later on in his career. I think Hopkins is still crushing it. I know they have Ridley, but he's also your number 4 receiver. And then Higgins, I think people are letting him slip because they know he's not happy with his deal in Cincinnati, even though he's reported. And then Devontae Adams, the quarterback play, becomes less of a question for me when you're talking about getting a guy like him in the 3rd round instead of like the mid or late 2nd. Adams, Higgins, Johnson, Hopkins, how thrilled were you with those 4 receivers early?
We like all those guys. I'm surprised Johnson and Hopkins were still there, honestly. But after the Hopkins pick, Jeff texts me, and he's like, they're not going to like our team because it's too old.
Yeah, it's the opposite, kind of what we're
There's
talking
only
about.
one reason I don't like your team, and you know what that reason is.
Yes, yeah.
We wanted Dak. I mean, you might not like Dak, and you might not like the Cowboys, but in
Fantasy football, I love Dak.
Dak is good.
Yeah, I mean, you had the opportunity. You took him over Love. You took him over Caleb Williams, and I totally understand. Well, I mean, you could make the case that Prescott probably should have gone around earlier tonight too, Dan.
Yeah, the quarterbacks. Oh, sorry, we're on the clock.
On the clock for your last pick here.
Yes.
With after you guys had taken Bo Nix and A.T. Perry with your previous 2 picks, the final pick of the Assassins tonight will be Zay Jones as wide receiver 94. Go ahead and finish your thought on Prescott.
Yeah, I mean, like everybody else, I've watched all these. I've watched all the live draft coverages, and most of the time, all the quarterbacks, fall. It's totally opposite from last year when they were all going sooner.
The pairing of Franklin and Nix at the 17-18, that is a cheap stack that you get late in this best ball format, Dan. Was that a combo that you and Jeff had discussed prior to the draft, getting them late?
Honestly, no. We like Franklin. We both like Franklin.
Mm-hmm.
I like Nix. I think later in the year he's going to be good. He might not start. Who knows at the beginning, but at the end of the year he might be starting, and he might do good. And they were college teammates. They know each other. So we're at this point this late with all these good drafters. All these pros and Joes. Everybody knows what they're doing. So you start looking at that. At the board in the 19th, 20th round, you're like, who are these guys? Because everybody good is gone,
Right, and that's exactly that's how it's going to go for the main event too. When you guys are drafting in the main event, with the FFPC this year, happens every year. One of the things I just noticed in your squad, so 3 quarterbacks here for you: Prescott, Rodgers, Nix. Besides the Troy Franklin in the 17th round, I'm not seeing any stacking there, which is fine. But I do notice Mark Andrews at the 210. Isaiah Likely at the 15. No stacks, but you did cuff your tight end here. Can you tell us a little bit about your philosophy? Again, a closed 12-team league, but you got to win the whole thing in order to get anything there. Your thoughts on not stacking, but still cuffing?
We watch all these podcasts, and they're all big on stacking, and maybe we're behind, but we don't really look to stack that much. But with Likely at that point, it was either going to be Andrews or Likely there, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, hopefully both of them don't get hurt. But if Andrews does go down, Likely's going to be there. And Likely was a top 5 tight end last year after Andrews went down. Mm-hmm. So I think we're set there with both of those guys. And Musgrave, I think he's going to be a sleeper tight end in Green Bay.
Yeah, I like Musgrave too, quite a bit, for sure. I liked him before the draft, and then after the Packers picked him, I was excited about that as a Packers fan as well. Dan, the guy you drafted in the 11th round here, wide receiver 55, Josh Downs, was getting some love from one of the beat writers, or actually a couple of the beat writers in Indy today. Downs is an interesting guy. You don't necessarily think of him as a best ball player, but maybe the value in him might be more of a PPR when you consider that he's not more of a PPR, more of a managed league, because it seems like he's past Alec Pierce. A.D. Mitchell is a field flipper that, as Farrell said, might not get on the field a lot. Josh Downs is a nice little value here for you in the 11th round.
Yeah, after those 4 wide receivers, and they might be, up there in age, but, we were looking for younger guys, that might be good. And Indy's going to be a good offense. And I think Downs, he can be a good PPR, but he can also, I think he can, break some long ones.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's entirely possible. And we've seen him do it. We saw him do it in college. We saw him do it a little bit last year as well. We spent some time tonight talking about the Broncos backfield, and we centered on Javonte Williams versus Jaleel McLaughlin. But tell us why we should not forget about your 16-10 pick tonight, Dan, in Audric Estime.
Again, we at this point, we're looking for, young guys that, by the end of the year, he might be stepping up. I don't think any of us know what the Broncos backfield is going to look like. Nope. Javonte Williams might have been cut, they said, and now he's looking great, and who knows? So I think he's a big Notre Dame guy, right?
Yep.
Yeah. So that's, Jeff, again, he's a big Notre Dame guy. So he was blowing up my phone about Audric there. So, I yield to him sometimes on those guys.
The vitriol, the venom, the smack talking from at Side of Bacon prior to the draft on X tonight was alive and well. We love to see that kind of confidence. Now that the draft is over, Dan, do you feel as confident, more confident, or less confident in this team winning this league?
I feel the same. I mean, I know they're pros, and most of them have their own podcasts and all, and
right.
But, Jeff and I have been doing this since we call it the Wyckoff. I don't know if that's how you call
it. 20
plus
plus years ago.
Yeah, the WCOFF, when that was out there, we used to go out there then. That's how long we've been going out there. And I don't know if we were in FFPC the first year they had it out there, because I think Wyckoff was still going on. But when Wyckoff went away, we moved over to FFPC. We did pretty good. And then in 2014, we finished second overall.
And now you have the opportunity to perhaps take down a much more lucrative grand prize in 2024 with $1 million on the line. Dan, so excited to talk with you tonight. I'm so glad the telecommunications cooperated, so we got you on the broadcast.
Yeah, I'm sitting in the police car right now doing this.
I didn't want to reveal that, but as long as you're the one revealing it, that's fine. We'll do that.
I think it's the first time ever that you're talking to somebody in a police car while we're doing this.
Definitely the first time we're talking to somebody.
I would say so.
Sitting in the front seat. In the back seat, I think it's happened before. But
before we go off real fast, can Jax come on real fast?
Yeah, absolutely, for sure. Absolutely. So Dan,
I'll turn it here towards him.
Dan will bring on his son tonight. Now, Jax, tell us a little bit about how do you feel about your dad's draft?
Are you a Cowboys fan too?
No, he likes the Cowboys, but he's a Miami Dolphin fan.
God, my kid's a Dolphin. My kid loves the Packers and he loves the Dolphins. I don't know what. I think it's just the speed. They like that speed with Achane and Hill and Waddle and all those guys.
His favorite player is Tyreek.
Yeah.
And so tonight with the third pick, he's like, "Oh, we're getting Tyreek," and he was kind of mad when we told him no.
That'll happen. That will happen. Until we see you in Vegas, Dan, we will follow you on the X. Dan's Side of Bacon, the 2014 FFPC Main Event runner-up, looking to do some damage in this draft and in the main event this year. Dan, thank you so much for joining us. Good draft tonight, man.
All right, thanks. We'll see you guys out there.
You got it. That is Dan Seidenfaden and drafting from the 3 spot tonight, along with his cohort, Jeff Conklin, the Kansas City Chiefs insider, dropping some knowledge tonight. So very good stuff from those guys. And with that, guys, the number 5 draft is done. I'll scroll up a little bit here. I don't know if there's any picks that we want to talk about early on that we didn't get to. I want to make sure we're covering all our bases before we sign off. Is there anything as we look at these squads? We didn't talk a whole lot about Justin Boone's squad. Maybe that's one that we can focus on here from the 12 spot. Getting Laporta and Njoku, focusing on the receivers, Evans, Metcalf, McLaurin. Taylor and Connor were the running backs early. I love the Jaden Daniels pick in the 8th round. He's climbing up as well. Goff and May, he gets later on. Terp, you look at that team, at least the first 14 rounds of it. Anything stand out to you there about what Justin Boone from the Score did?
It's not a bad team at all. Getting the stack for the Commanders with Daniels and Terry is always good. I'm a big DK Metcalf fan this year, so I like that pick. Njoku is a guy that, we've seen go higher in these drafts and some of the ones we've done so far. So all in all, it's good value. Jameson Williams, all positive so far from coach coming out and speaking so highly of him. Curtis Samuel's another guy that it should be one of the top target guys in Buffalo. Good team. I'm not the biggest fan of the first 2 picks, but outside of that, it's a very well-drafted team.
I love the quarterbacks. I really like this. That's what you've got tremendous rookie upside, and then you've got
upside and safe.
And I like that. And then Ray Davis comes in.
Goff has QB1 upside and domes, and they have a lot
I am glad to hear you say something positive about that. That's really great.
we agreed twice tonight. That's too much.
But yeah. And then Jalen Polk, Balky, we didn't get to talking about the draft board. Mm-hmm. You go across that 14th round and look at those wide receivers, and that's my case. That's my case for getting your running backs early, because you can get receiver talent with upside from these young guys in the 14th round, and Douglas and Mooney. When Mooney is your veteran of that group, but that's what I'm talking about. Yeah. But a personal thing, Balky, while we still got him on the air. Maurice Jenkins, please give me a call.
Well, there you go.
He's a Cowboys fan. I don't need to talk to him either.
But Farrell and Maurice Jenkins hooking up on a conversation later on tonight. That's the inside baseball that you will get when you watch the Pros versus Joes on the FFPC YouTube channel tonight. Farrell, last thing I want to get to here. We didn't talk about Brian Drivelin's team, from the 5 spot. I know you love your Joes. This was the team that went Dolphin to start in Hill and Achane, and then went tight end in Engram and Kittle. You see what he did at receiver with Diggs, Rashee Rice, JSN, Brian Thomas. Quarterbacks ended up going with Jordan Love, Trevor Lawrence, Daniel Jones, peppers in some Charbonnet, Vidal, Dowdle in there as well. I know you like Xavier Legette too. What do you make of Brian Jervelin's team here from the 5 spot tonight after he was the only team to draft 2 tight ends in the first, 6 rounds, something like that? I
really love what he did individually with each player. It looks like he underpaid at every position. Everybody he got in this draft seems to be gone in those spots when I'm picking them. I think he did a wonderful job.
The team all comes down to Devin Achane. That's it.
Why you say that?
What he was last year, stays healthy, this team could be a league winner. If he, gets hurt, gets banged out.
Now we've got this team as league winner, Terp. The other guys are going to win the whole thing. How the hell does that work? You got a league winner here. You got another team winning the whole thing, which means they would also have to win this league.
Could be a league winner.
You've completely ignored team number 9, noted champs, because they're Joes. I mean, God bless you, Terp.
The carnage will continue tomorrow night, and of course we'll have a Pros versus Joes draft as well. Farrell Elliott and Dave Terpoli going back and forth. We love it. The listeners love it. The viewers love it. The American people love it. Everybody loves it, and we will do it one more time at we go live at 10 p.m. Eastern time tomorrow. The 11-time FFPC league champ Dave Terpoli at Dave Terp, and of course Farrell. KFFSC.com is where to go to sign up for the Kentucky Fantasy Football State Championship. Live in Cincinnati's coming up. Live in Louisville's coming up. And, of course, the main events. Anything else that we should be talking about with KFFSC?
Well, just get over there and create an account and plan to come and have a great time over that weekend. Sunday, Balky, on our final day, the 25th of August, Sunday at Caesars, where you'll be winning even more trophies this year. We've got plenty of room. Normally, that's the first thing that sells out. This year, it's been lagging a little bit. So, if you haven't made your plans yet, please make them to include us in one of those draft days, or do like Balky does and stay all weekend.
That's the best way to do it, quite frankly. I'm looking forward to it. I'm looking forward to doing another show with you guys tomorrow.
Jimmy Williams just invited Terp to come. Jimmy Williams is saying, Jimmy Williams. I mean, Terp. The membership of the league is an outreach to you, and they want to be your friend, and they want to be there. Come to Kentucky.
I'll be there once in the next 10 years.
Well, but that's you may be disqualified for those kind of comments. What we need to do, you don't want to turn your back on the league members. Balky, shouldn't he come?
I will never turn my back on you.
Yeah, but it's fantastic.
The will they or won't they storyline between Terp and the KFFSC continues, and you can watch the next episode installment tomorrow at 10 p.m. Eastern Time. Terp, Farrell, be good. We'll talk with you tomorrow night.
See you guys.
That is Dave Terpoli. That is Farrell Elliott. That is our show tonight, ladies and gentlemen, as we move forward through the Pros versus Joes competition right here on the FFPC YouTube channel, or whether you're watching on the Better Sports Network or any of the FFPC socials. I want to thank tonight's guests, Nick Thompson, Andrew Cooper, Dan Seidenfaden, and, of course, Jim Coventry for hopping on, making a few picks on the air. I want to thank Farrell Elliott, Dave Terpoli, Darren Armani, the godfather of the Pros versus Joes competition, the FFPC, our producer and mutual friend, Rob, audio engineer, my best friend, Bryce, and most of all of you listening and viewing this program as well. Tomorrow night, the Tequila League will wrap up our live coverage of the FFPC Pros versus Joes installments for 2024. Again, 10 p.m. start tomorrow. The Joes tomorrow feature Kevin Borg, Michael Mann, former guest of the HSFF Hour, Ryan Santos, David Coleman, who is a very talented FFPC drafter as well. Don Terminello going to be drafting in the Pros versus Joes tomorrow night. That's Azuri. Many of you know him. You've drafted against him, and we'll see him draft live on the Pros versus Joes tomorrow. And then another guy who's been on a few of the FFPC podcasts over the years, Mr. Rob Abbott, picking 12th tomorrow night for the Joes. For the Pros, we're going to get Howard Bender from Fantasy Alarm. I'll actually be on the Alarm tomorrow on SiriusXM Fantasy Sports Radio at 6:35 Eastern Time, as Howard will preview his strategy that he will be exhibiting from the one spot tomorrow. So listen for that. It's going to be fun having him on or talking to him, and maybe he'll come on the show tomorrow night too. That'd be great. Michael Nazarick, one of our favorites from Fantasy Football Mastermind, is going to be picking third. Ryan Kramer and Sean Green from the Sports Gambling Podcast, they're drafting fifth tomorrow. Fantasy Points' own John Hansen is going to be picking seventh. Doug Orth from Fantasy Football Today in the 9 spot, another guy I've loved chopping it up with. And, of course, John Paulson from 4 for 4 will wrap up the pro contingent on the program tomorrow. The FFPC has spots open in the Fantasy Pros Championship in the midnight draft coming up, starting exactly 1 hour from right now. 8 spots available. We're in late July. Those spots are going to fly off the board. So get in a draft after you've consumed all this content tonight. Use it to your advantage as you try to win $1 million grand prize. And don't forget, if you register and draft tonight or at any time prior to the all the way up until the midnight draft on Thursday, you'll be entered into the weekday giveaway. It's our final weekday giveaway of the 2024 season. If you enter that, you'll be entered into a drawing for 3 free Fantasy Pros Championship teams this year. That's over $1,000 in free teams that we're giving away on Friday. So hopefully you can claim one of those teams as well. MyFFPC.com is where to go for that. The main event slow and live drafts are off and running with the FFPC. MyFFPC.com is where to go for that. I think we have, I'll look it up real quick right now. Our next live main event is going to be Wednesday night this week. 5 spots left in that. So check that out if you want to win $1 million grand prize in that as well. 2 separate $1 million grand prizes this year. The best ball tournament and the Superflex best ball tournament, $300,000 and $100,000 grand prize in that, $125 and $35 to enter respectively there. Dynasty startups available at myffpc.com, as well as the Empire Dynasty League startups as well. Check out the KFFSC main event. KFFSC.com is where to go for that. You can compete against me and many of the other people that you've seen in these drafts in the Pros versus Joes who are going to be competing in Kentucky or online as well, or in Cincinnati as well. In case you have never watched the High Stakes Fantasy Football Hour or show before, Fantasy Football Hour, excuse me, we go live Friday nights at 10 p.m. Farrell and I, we talk with an FFPC guest every single week, and always appreciate their insights. You can get that anywhere you get podcasts, of course, on all the FFPC YouTube socials as well, YouTube, X, Facebook, all that good stuff. So check that out year round. We'll do content there as well. I want to thank you all for watching. Thank you all for listening. We'll cut tonight's broadcast off right now, and we will be back at 10 p.m. Eastern time tomorrow here on the FFPC YouTube channel for Pros versus Joes number 6. Be good, everybody. Your week continues now.